I spent 12 years building my husband's family business. Every contract, every investor, every successful project. My fingerprints were on all of it. Yet on my father-in-law's 70th birthday, there wasn't a single chair with my name on it. When I quietly asked my husband, he looked me in the eyes, smiled, and said words that destroyed our marriage forever. "You're not really family anymore. Tonight you're only here to help." Everyone laughed. Even my mother-in-law. Even the woman my husband had secretly been seeing for months. I smiled, walked outside, made one phone call. 15 days later, the family empire collapsed because they had forgotten one tiny detail. Nothing they owned actually belonged to them. People often say revenge is best served cold. They're wrong. The best revenge is served with a smile so convincing that no one realizes they're watching the beginning of their own downfall. That smile was on my face the evening my husband destroyed 12 years of marriage with a single sentence. "My name is Evelyn Carter Ashford." 3 years ago, every business magazine in New York praised the Ashford Group for becoming one of America's fastest-growing luxury real estate companies. They called my husband, Michael Ashford, a visionary. Television hosts invited him to interviews. Business podcasts labeled him the king of luxury developments. His father, Richard Ashford, proudly accepted Lifetime Achievement Awards. His younger sister, Isabella, became an internet celebrity because of the family's wealth. Everyone admired them. No one knew the truth. Behind every successful project, behind every impossible deal, behind every investor willing to risk millions, there was me. I never appeared in interviews. I never stood beside Michael during ribbon-cutting ceremonies. I never smiled for magazine covers. Because according to my husband's family, a real Ashford woman stays in the background. I accepted that. Not because I was weak, but because I believed love didn't need recognition. I couldn't have been more wrong. 2 months before Richard Ashford's 70th birthday, Michael walked into my office carrying a thick black folder. "Evelyn," he said casually, "Dad wants this birthday to be unforgettable." I looked up from my laptop. "How unforgettable?" He smiled. 500 guests. I nearly laughed. "You've got to be kidding." "No." He dropped the folder onto my desk. Inside were architectural sketches of a private estate transformed into a royal palace. Crystal chandeliers. Imported roses from Ecuador. A live orchestra from Vienna. A Michelin star chef. Private helicopters. Luxury fireworks synchronized with music. Estimated budget. Almost $2.8 million US. I stared at him. "This isn't a birthday. It's a coronation." Michael wrapped his arms around my shoulders. "But nobody plans events like you." He knew exactly which words would work. Planning impossible things was my weakness. Within seconds, my mind had already started solving problems. Guest seating. Security. Parking. Entertainment. Media coverage. Special dietary requests. Emergency medical teams. Everything. I smiled. "I'll make it perfect." Michael kissed my forehead. "I knew I could count on you." Looking back, that kiss felt less like love, and more like a signature at the bottom of a contract. For the next 8 weeks, I barely slept. My assistant, Lauren, begged me to slow down. "You've worked 72 hours this week." "I'm fine." "No, you're not." She placed a cup of coffee beside me. "You haven't even gone home." I rubbed my eyes. "If Richard's birthday succeeds, investors from Europe will attend. So if they like what they see, they'll invest." Lauren folded her arms. "Which means Michael gets another magazine cover." I forced a laugh. "That's enough." She looked directly into my eyes. "No, Evelyn. I've worked with you for 7 years. I've never once seen anyone thank you. They thank Michael. They thank Richard. They thank Isabella. But never you." I remained silent, because deep inside, I knew she was right. The birthday arrived on a warm Saturday evening. The Ashford estate looked like something from a royal movie. Golden lights illuminated every tree. Hundreds of white roses lined the entrance. Luxury cars stretched nearly half a mile. Celebrities, politicians, judges, professional athletes, movie stars, Everyone important was there. Guests gasped as they entered. This is unbelievable. It looks better than the Met Gala. I've never seen anything like this. Every compliment made me smile. Because every detail, every flower, every candle, every piece of music had existed in my imagination months earlier. I disappeared into a private room upstairs. Lauren helped zip my midnight blue evening gown. You finally look like the woman who deserves tonight. I smiled nervously. I hope Richard likes everything. She frowned. I hope they finally appreciate you. I didn't answer. When I entered the ballroom, the orchestra stopped playing for a brief announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Ashford family. Everyone applauded. Richard entered first. Then his wife, Margaret. Then Michael. Then Isabella. I walked behind them. Nobody announced my name. Not even once. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Maybe it was just an oversight. I ignored it. The master of ceremonies invited everyone to dinner. Guests searched for their assigned tables. I walked toward table 1, where family always sat. Richard's chair, Margaret's chair, Michael's chair, Isabella's chair, Callista Morgan. I frowned. Callista? Why was Michael's new marketing consultant sitting with family? I searched for my name. Once. Twice. 3 times. Nothing. Every chair was occupied. My seat didn't exist. For a long moment, I simply stood there, staring at the empty space where my place should have been. Around me, laughter echoed through the ballroom. No one seemed to notice. Or perhaps, they noticed, and chose not to care. I turned slowly toward Michael. He was adjusting his tuxedo, smiling as photographers snapped pictures. I walked up to him quietly so no guest could overhear. Michael. He glanced at me without concern. Yes, I think there's been a mistake. What mistake? My seat. He looked toward the family table, then back at me. A slow smile spread across his face. Not a loving smile. Not an apologetic one. A smile I had never seen before. Cold. Almost amused. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him. Then he whispered 5 words that changed my life forever. You're not really family anymore. The words echoed in my head. You're not really family anymore. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. After 12 years. After sacrificing birthdays, anniversaries, vacations, and countless sleepless nights to build the Ashford empire, my husband was telling me I wasn't family. I forced a smile. I'm sorry. What did you just say? Michael didn't even look embarrassed. Instead, he adjusted his cufflinks as if we were discussing the weather. You heard me. I looked toward the family table again. There she was. Callista Morgan. 28 years old. Flawless makeup. Designer gown. A diamond bracelet I recognized instantly. I had bought it. Last Christmas. For my mother-in-law. Now it was on Callista's wrist. My stomach tightened. Michael noticed where I was looking. Oh, you're wondering about Callista? I nodded silently. He smiled. Dad wanted someone younger at the family table. I stared at him. You replaced your wife. With your employee? Before he could answer, a sweet voice erupted. Evelyn. Callista walked toward us carrying a glass of champagne. She smiled so warmly that anyone watching would think we were best friends. Oh my goodness. She pretended to look surprised. Didn't they save you a seat? I looked directly into her eyes. I was just asking about that. She laughed softly, then leaned close enough for only me to hear. Helpers don't usually sit with the family. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then she took another sip of champagne. Louder this time, so nearby guests could hear, she said. Honestly, Evelyn, everything looks beautiful. You organized all of this perfectly. She patted my shoulder. You really do have a gift for serving people. Serving. Not leading. Not creating. Serving. Several guests chuckled politely. They assumed it was harmless teasing. Only I understood the insult hidden beneath every word. Before I could respond, my mother-in-law, Margaret, appeared beside us. Oh, Evelyn. There you are. I've been looking everywhere. Relief washed over me. Maybe she had discovered the mistake. Maybe someone had forgotten my place card. I found your seat. I smiled. Wonderful. She pointed toward the far end of the ballroom, near the kitchen entrance, beside the temporary catering staff. Plastic chairs, foldable tables, disposable water bottles. This should be fine for you. I looked where she was pointing. Every waiter, every cleaner, every assistant was sitting there. My smile slowly disappeared. You can't be serious. Margaret frowned. Don't make tonight about yourself. This evening belongs to Richard. I looked back at the family table. Crystal glasses, fresh orchids, gold-plated dinnerware. Then back at the catering section. Paper napkins, metal folding chairs. It wasn't about the chair. It never was. It was the message. Richard Ashford stood to begin his birthday speech. The ballroom fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is not only my 70th birthday. It is also a celebration of family. Applause filled the room. I almost laughed. Family? Really? He continued. Our success came because we always trusted one another. Michael nodded proudly. Callista smiled. Margaret wiped away fake tears. I stood at the back of the room, completely invisible. Then Richard raised his glass. I'd especially like to thank my son Michael, the brilliant man who built everything our family has today. Thunderous applause erupted. Camera flashes exploded across the ballroom. I looked at Michael. He accepted every compliment without hesitation. Not once. Not once did he glance in my direction. Not once did he say, "It wasn't me. It was Evelyn." Because the truth had become inconvenient. As the applause faded, a young waiter accidentally bumped into me. I'm so sorry, ma'am. He looked terrified. I smiled gently. It's okay. Then something caught my attention. Two security guards walked toward me. One of them spoke politely. Mrs. Ashford? Yes. Mr. Michael Ashford has requested that only immediate family remain near the main stage. I'm his wife. The guard hesitated. I'm sorry, ma'am. I was only given instructions. Around us, several guests had begun watching. Whispers spread through the ballroom. Why are security talking to her? What's happening? Isn't she Michael's wife? Heat rushed into my face. This wasn't humiliation anymore. This was public humiliation. Exactly as they had planned. I slowly stepped away from the stage. Not because security forced me. Because I refused to give the Ashfords the satisfaction of watching me argue. As I turned, I heard laughter. Callista. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I kept walking. Straight through the ballroom. Past the orchestra. Past the photographers. Past hundreds of guests. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked if I was okay. Not one member of the Ashford family followed. Outside, the cool night air hit my face. For the first time all evening, I allowed myself to cry. Just once. One silent tear rolled down my cheek. Then I wiped it away. Behind me, fireworks exploded into the sky. Gold. Silver. Blue. Everyone inside applauded. The birthday celebration continued. As if I had never existed. I reached into my purse to find my car keys. Instead, my fingers touched something unexpected. A small silver USB drive. I frowned. I didn't remember putting it there. There was no note. No label. Nothing. Just the flash drive. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. My heart skipped a beat. I answered. Hello. A calm male voice spoke only one sentence. Don't go home, Evelyn, if you want to know who really betrayed you. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. A cold chill ran down my spine. Because deep inside, I suddenly realized something terrifying. Tonight wasn't the beginning of the betrayal. It had started long before the birthday. And someone wanted me to uncover the truth. The unknown number disappeared from my screen before I could call back. I stood alone in the parking lot, fireworks still exploding behind me. Guests inside were celebrating, laughing, toasting, taking photographs. Meanwhile, I was no longer sure if I had a marriage, or if I'd ever had one at all. I looked down at the silver USB drive in my hand. It was ordinary. No brand. No label. Just a tiny piece of metal that suddenly felt heavier than gold. I climbed into my car, locked the doors, and drove away. Not home. Somewhere safe. 30 minutes later, I parked outside my office. Ashford Group headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of a 40-story building in Manhattan. At least, that's what everyone believed. Very few people knew that I had personally negotiated the lease years earlier. Every document, every contract, every legal clause had passed through my hands. As I entered the empty building, the night security guard smiled. "Working late again, Mrs. Ashford?" I smiled politely. "Looks like it." The elevator doors closed. My reflection stared back at me. Mascara slightly smudged. Hair no longer perfect. Eyes filled with questions. For the first time in years, I looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. My office lights illuminated the room as I inserted the USB drive into my laptop. Nothing happened for a few seconds. Then, a folder appeared. Ashford_private. Inside were dozens of files. Bank statements, contracts, audio recordings, emails, photos, videos. I frowned. Whoever had prepared this knew exactly what they were doing. The first video automatically opened. The timestamp showed 8 months earlier. The screen revealed Michael sitting inside a private restaurant. Across from him, Callista. She reached across the table and held his hand. "I hate pretending," she whispered. Michael laughed. "It won't be much longer." She smiled. "What about Evelyn?" He shrugged. "She still believes I love her." My heart stopped. Callista leaned closer. "Doesn't she suspect anything?" Michael shook his head. "She trusts me too much." They laughed together. Then he kissed her. I closed my eyes. Not because of the affair. That hurt. But what came next hurt even more. Michael said, "Once Dad transfers everything into my name, Evelyn becomes useless." Callista smirked. "And then, we'll divorce her." My fingers tightened around the desk. They weren't planning to leave me. They were planning to erase me. I opened another file. An audio recording. Richard Ashford's voice echoed through my office. "How much does Evelyn actually know?" Michael answered confidently. "Almost nothing." Richard laughed. "Good. If she ever discovers the trust documents, we lose everything." My eyes froze. Trust documents? What trust documents? I paused the recording. Something wasn't right. I knew every major contract, every shareholder agreement, every financing deal. But trust documents? Why had I never heard of them? Another file. Another recording. This time, Margaret spoke. "I'm tired of pretending she's part of this family." Richard chuckled. "The birthday is perfect." Michael asked, "You really think she'll leave quietly?" Richard answered without hesitation. "She's loyal. She always does what's best for us." Everyone laughed. Even Callista. I couldn't listen anymore. I slammed the laptop shut. Silence filled the office. 12 years. Every anniversary. Every Christmas. Every family vacation. Every sacrifice. Every late night. Every impossible deadline. Every success. Had all been built on one terrible mistake. I had mistaken gratitude for love. The office door suddenly opened. I jumped. Lauren stepped inside carrying 2 coffees. She stopped the moment she saw my face. "Oh my God. What happened?" I tried speaking. Nothing came out. She quietly placed the coffees on my desk, then sat beside me, without asking questions, without forcing conversation. Just sat there. After several minutes, I whispered, "They planned everything." Lauren frowned. "What do you mean?" I turned the laptop toward her. "Watch." 20 minutes later. She looked ready to cry. I always knew Michael was arrogant. But this. She shook her head. "This is evil." I nodded silently. "I don't understand one thing." "What?" She pointed toward the paused recording. "They mentioned trust documents. You said you've never seen them." "I haven't." Lauren looked thoughtful. Then maybe. They're hidden from you. I laughed bitterly. Hidden from the chief financial officer? Impossible. She looked directly at me. Evelyn, when was the last time you checked the original company archive? I stopped breathing. The archive. Nobody had accessed it in years. The basement vault. Paper contracts. Original legal agreements. Documents older than the company itself. Only 3 people had access. Richard, the company lawyer, and me. At exactly 11:47 p.m., Lauren and I entered the underground archive. Rows of steel cabinets stretched into darkness. Dust covered everything. Most employees didn't even know this room existed. I unlocked cabinet 17. Inside were hundreds of thick binders. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Nothing. Until Lauren pulled out a faded brown envelope hidden behind an old property file. Evelyn, this doesn't belong here. There was no company logo. Only 6 handwritten words. For Evelyn. Open only if betrayed. My hands began to tremble. Someone, years ago, had expected this day to come. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside lay a yellowed letter, signed by a name I hadn't seen in nearly 15 years. Edward Carter. My grandfather. The man who had taught me everything about business. The man who died before my wedding. Tears filled my eyes as I unfolded the first page. His handwriting was unmistakable. The letter began with one sentence that made my heart pound. If you are reading this, the Ashfords have finally shown you who they really are. I stared at the words. My grandfather had known, years before I did, and whatever secrets he had left inside that envelope were powerful enough to make Richard Ashford fear something called the trust documents. I took a slow breath, then turned the page. What I read next changed everything I believed about the Ashford empire. My hands trembled as I unfolded the yellowed letter. The paper smelled old, almost forgotten. Yet the handwriting instantly took me back to childhood. Every Sunday, my grandfather would sit in his library, wearing the same gray cardigan, writing notes with his black fountain pen. He always said, a contract. He tells people what they own. A well-written contract tells them what they don't own. Back then, I thought he was teaching me business. Now, I realized he had been teaching me survival. The letter began. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then I was right. The Ashford family finally showed you their true faces. Before you cry, before you blame yourself, remember one thing. You were never weak. You simply loved people who mistook kindness for weakness. A tear rolled down my cheek. Lauren quietly handed me a tissue. I kept reading. When Michael first asked for your hand in marriage, I hired investigators. Not because I distrusted you. Because I distrusted wealth. Rich families often value inheritance more than love. Richard Ashford impressed everyone. Except me. I frowned. Grandfather had investigated them? Why had he never told me? The next paragraph answered my question. Had I warned you, you would have believed I was simply an old man who feared change. So instead, I prepared for the day you might need protection. Protection? I exchanged a confused glance with Lauren. I continued reading. 6 months before your wedding, Richard Ashford came to me in secret. He needed money. My heart skipped. Money? The Ashfords had always claimed they were wealthy. Grandfather continued. Their company was collapsing. Banks had refused further financing. Creditors were preparing lawsuits. Within 90 days, the Ashford Group would have ceased to exist. I looked up in disbelief. That's impossible, I whispered. Lauren slowly shook her head. Unless everything we've ever been told was a lie. The letter continued. Richard begged me for help. He promised that once the company recovered, he would treat you like his own daughter. He swore your future would always be secure. I didn't believe his promises, so I made my own conditions. My breathing became heavier. Conditions? I turned the page. Attached behind it was a copy of a legal agreement. Across the top, in bold letters, it read, The Carter Family Private Trust. Beneath it, another sentence. Primary beneficiary, Evelyn Grace Carter. My heart nearly stopped. Lauren covered her mouth. Oh my God. I quickly scanned the pages. Then, everything became clear. Every commercial building, every warehouse, every luxury apartment, every hotel project, every piece of land the Ashford Group operated on had never been sold. They had been leased for 99 years through the Carter Family Trust, which meant the Ashford Empire didn't actually own its empire. They rented it from my family. I sat frozen for nearly a minute. Michael, Richard, Margaret, none of them had ever truly owned the kingdom they bragged about. They had simply been allowed to rule it, as long as the trust permitted. Lauren read. Evelyn, does this mean? I nodded slowly. If the trust ends, the Ashford Group loses almost everything. She stared at me. You control the trust? I shook my head. I don't know. I reached the final page. There, folded neatly inside, was one last document. It was addressed to me, not as a granddaughter, but officially. Appointment of successor trustee. Effective immediately upon the death of Edward Carter. The sole authority of the Carter Family Trust shall transfer to. I stopped reading. My vision blurred. I blinked twice. Surely I had misunderstood. I read it again. Then again. There was no mistake. The document declared, Successor Trustee, Evelyn Grace Carter. I looked at Lauren. I've owned it. All this time. She nodded slowly. And nobody told you. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the underground archive. Both of us jumped. Another knock. Much harder this time. Lauren whispered. Who knows we're down here? I don't know. The security cameras in the archive weren't connected to the main building. Nobody should have known. Then a voice came from outside the heavy steel door. Mrs. Ashford? It was one of the building's night security officers. Evelyn. I slowly approached. Yes. His voice sounded nervous. I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's someone upstairs asking for you. Who? A pause. Then he answered. Your husband. My heartbeat quickened. Michael? Here? At midnight? How did he know where I was? The guard continued. He says it's an emergency. Lauren grabbed my arm. Don't go. I looked toward the steel cabinet. The trust documents. My grandfather's letter. The original contracts. If Michael found them, everything would change. I carefully placed the documents back into the envelope and slipped it into my leather briefcase. Then I locked the cabinet. The key clicked. A sound that suddenly felt like the beginning of a war. Outside, Michael was waiting. But for the first time in 12 years, he wasn't meeting the obedient wife who solved all his problems. He was about to meet the woman who legally owned the ground beneath his empire. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. It was 12:38 a.m. The entire headquarters was silent. Only a few lights remained on. As Lauren and I stepped into the lobby, I immediately saw him. Michael. He stood near the reception desk with his tuxedo jacket draped over one arm. His bow tie was loose. The confident smile he had worn at the birthday party was gone. Instead, he looked worried. The moment he saw me, relief washed over his face. There you are. He walked toward me. I've been calling you for hours. I glanced at my phone. 32 missed calls. 15 text messages. 3 voicemails. I hadn't heard any of them. Not after watching those videos. Not after reading my grandfather's letter. Not after discovery. Ing, who truly owned the Ashford Empire. For the first time, his panic meant nothing to me. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. His hand froze in the air. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Evelyn, can we talk? His voice was gentle, almost desperate. If this had happened yesterday, I would have melted. Tonight, I simply folded my arms. Talk. He looked at Lauren. Privately, I answered before she could move. Lauren stays. His jaw tightened. She's an employee. No, I said calmly. She's the only person in this building who hasn't betrayed me. Silence. Michael glanced at Lauren, then back at me. He forced a smile. You're upset. I understand. Tonight got out of hand. Out of hand? Those 3 words almost made me laugh. So that's what we're calling public humiliation now? Evelyn. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Oh. I tilted my head. How exactly was it supposed to happen? You planned to embarrass me privately? He sighed deeply. Callista insisted on sitting with us. I stared at him. You expect me to believe that your employee made decisions for your family? His eyes shifted away. The first sign he was lying. I had seen that expression hundreds of times during business negotiations. Whenever Michael lied, he looked slightly to the left. He was doing it now. I made a mistake. He finally admitted. I'm sorry. The words sounded rehearsed, like lines memorized before walking onto a stage. I asked quietly, do you love her? He blinked. What? Callista, do you love her? He answered too quickly. Of course not. Another lie. Because I had already seen the video. The dinner. The kiss. The promises. He didn't know that. Not yet. Instead of arguing, I smiled. A calm, gentle, unexpected smile. His shoulders visibly relaxed. He thought the conversation was turning in his favor. He had no idea. I was simply giving him enough rope to hang himself. I want to fix this, he said. I've booked us a vacation. A private island. Just the 2 of us. We'll leave tomorrow. Interesting. Very interesting. A man planning divorce suddenly wanted a romantic vacation. Why? Unless he needed something from me first. I asked casually, what about the board meeting on Monday? He hesitated. It can wait. No, it couldn't. The Monday meeting involved final approval for transferring company assets into a new holding company. I had prepared those documents myself. Or rather, I had been asked to prepare them. Suddenly, everything made sense. They didn't need me after Monday. They needed my signature. After that, I would become disposable. I decided to test him. So, should I still sign the transfer documents? For the briefest moment. His eyes lit up. It lasted less than a second. But I saw it. Then he quickly hid his excitement. If you want. He shrugged. No pressure. No pressure? Michael Ashford had never said those words in his life. Every project, every investment, every contract, everything had deadlines. Yet now, the single most important legal transfer in company history had no pressure. That confirmed it. The documents were a trap. Before I could speak again, the reception phone rang. The night receptionist answered. Her face turned pale. Mr. Ashford. She looked at Michael. It's your father. Michael grabbed the phone. Dad, even from several feet away. I could hear Richard shouting through the receiver. What? When? How? Michael's face drained of color. No. That's impossible. He slowly lowered the phone. What happened? I asked. He looked completely shaken. Our legal department can't find the original property deeds. I felt my heartbeat remain perfectly steady. Of course they couldn't. Because there were no deeds. Only lease agreements. And those originals were locked safely downstairs. Exactly where my grandfather had hidden them. Richard must have started looking after realizing something was wrong. Too late. Much too late. Michael suddenly grabbed both of my shoulders. Evelyn, I need your help. His voice cracked. Dad says there are missing documents. You know where everything is. Please, come home. Home. That word sounded strangely foreign now. Was it ever really my home? Or just another office where I worked without pay? I gently removed his hands. I'll think about it. Evelyn. Please. There it was. The first genuine plea. Not from a husband. From a desperate businessman. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing whatever those missing documents represented. And he still didn't know. The woman standing in front of him already possessed every answer he was searching for. As Michael stood there waiting for my reply, my phone vibrated once again. Another unknown number. I answered. A calm female voice whispered, "Don't trust anyone in the Ashford family, not even the ones who pretend to be on your side." Before I could respond, She added one sentence that sent a chill down my spine. Your grandfather didn't leave you just one letter. He left you an entire plan. The call ended. I stared at the screen. An entire plan? How many secrets had my grandfather buried? And who was the mysterious woman helping me from the shadows? Behind me, the city lights shimmered through the glass walls. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about uncovering a 20-year-old game that had been carefully set in motion long before I ever married Michael. And I had just become its final player. The call had lasted less than 10 seconds. But it changed everything. Your grandfather didn't leave you just one letter. He left you an entire plan. I stared at the phone. The number was hidden. No caller ID. No location. Nothing. When I looked up, Michael was still standing in front of me, waiting. Evelyn, please say something. I looked at him. For 12 years. His face had been my definition of home. Tonight, it looked like the face of a stranger. I need time. His shoulders slumped. I understand. No, I replied calmly. You don't. Then Lauren and I walked past him. For the first time since our marriage. I left Michael standing behind me. He didn't follow. He simply watched, as controls slowly slipped through his fingers. Instead of going home, Lauren drove us to my grandfather's old estate in Connecticut. The mansion had been emptying since his funeral 15 years earlier. I had inherited it, but I could never bring myself to sell it. Something about that place always felt alive. We arrived just before sunrise. The iron gates creaked open. The stone driveway was covered with fallen leaves. The house looked frozen in time. Every window, every brick, every memory, exactly as I remembered. Lauren looked around. It's beautiful. I smiled sadly. It used to feel warm. Inside, dust covered the furniture. Grandfather's favorite grandfather clock still stood in the entrance hall. It had stopped at exactly 9:17, the same time it stopped the night he died. Lauren gently touched the wooden railing. So, where do we begin? I remembered the last sentence of his letter. If betrayal comes, go to the library. Trust the clock, not the key. At the time, it had sounded poetic. Now, it sounded like instructions. We entered the library. Thousands of books lined the walls. A large oak desk stood beside the fireplace. Everything was exactly as he had left it, except the clock. It was the only object that seemed oddly polished, as if someone had cleaned it recently. Lauren frowned. Didn't you say nobody lives here? They don't. She walked closer. Then who cleaned this? A chill ran down my spine. Someone else had been here. Recently. I examined the antique clock. Nothing unusual. Until I remembered. Trust the clock, not the key. The clock had no winding key. Instead, its hands could move freely. I carefully turned the minute hand. From 9:17 to 11:45. Nothing. I turned it back. Still nothing. Lauren crossed her arms. Maybe we're overthinking it. Then I noticed something. The second hand. Unlike the others, it pointed toward the Roman numeral 12. It wouldn't move. Almost as if it wasn't meant to. I gently pressed it inward. Click. A deep mechanical sound echoed beneath the floor. The bookshelf beside the fireplace slowly slid sideways. Lauren gasped. Oh my God. Behind it, a narrow stone staircase descended into darkness. Cold air rushed upward. The smell of old paper and cedar filled the room. I switched D on my phone's flashlight. At the bottom of the stairs was a massive steel door. No handle, only a brass plaque. It read, Carter Family Vault. Below it, another inscription. For wisdom, not revenge. I swallowed hard. My grandfather had built this, and I'd never known it existed. The vault door stood slightly open. Someone had already been inside. Lauren whispered, Evelyn, I don't like this. Neither did I. But turning back wasn't an option anymore. We stepped inside. The room was enormous. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Boxes, ledgers, photographs, original property maps. old stock certificates, tape recordings. It wasn't just a vault. It was an archive. A history of the Carter family spanning nearly a century. In the center of the room rested a polished walnut table. On it, a single black envelope. My name was written across the front. Evelyn. Nothing else. I opened it. Inside was another handwritten note. If you found this, then you solved the first puzzle. I'm proud of you. I smiled despite myself. Even after his death, Grandfather was still teaching me. Beneath the note lay a thick leather folder. Its title made my pulse race. Project Phoenix. Inside were dozens of color-coded files. Every file had a family member's name. Richard Ashford, Margaret Ashford, Michael Ashford, Isabella Ashford, even Callista Morgan. Lauren looked at me in disbelief. He investigated all of them? I slowly nodded. For years. I opened Michael's file first. The first page contained a psychological profile. It read, strengths, charismatic, ambitious, persuasive, weaknesses, greed, pride, vanity, prediction. If given unlimited power without accountability, he will eventually betray those closest to him. I froze. The report was dated 13 years ago. 1 year before I married Michael. My grandfather had predicted everything. Every lie, every betrayal, every decision. Long before it happened. Suddenly, a faint creak echoed through the vault. Lauren looked toward the staircase. Did you hear that? I nodded. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Someone else was inside the house. We turned off our flashlights. The vault fell into darkness. The footsteps grew louder. 1, 2, 3. They stopped just outside the steel door. Neither of us breathed. Then, a familiar female voice echoed through the silence. Evelyn. It wasn't Callista. It wasn't Margaret. It was softer, older, almost comforting. Then she spoke the words that made my blood run cold. I've been waiting 15 years to give you the rest of your grandfather's message. Lauren gripped my arm. I stared toward the doorway. A silhouette slowly appeared in the dim light. As the woman stepped forward, I recognized her. The elderly housekeeper who had worked for my grandfather since I was a child. The woman everyone believed had retired. The very week after his funeral. She smiled gently, then said, My name isn't Martha. It never was. The elderly woman stepped into the dim light. Her silver hair was neatly tied back. She wore the same simple gray cardigan I remembered from childhood. To me, she had always been Martha, the woman who baked apple pies, the woman who bandaged my scraped knees, the woman who tucked a blanket over me whenever I fell asleep in grandfather's library. She smiled gently. My name isn't Martha. It never was. I stared at her. What did you say? She took a deep breath. My real name is Eleanor Hayes. I served your grandfather for 37 years. And for the last 15. I've been protecting you. Lauren stepped in front of me instinctively. How do we know we can trust you? The old woman reached into her coat pocket. She removed an antique gold pocket watch. My heart skipped. I recognized it instantly. It had belonged to my grandfather. Every Sunday, he would place it on his desk before beginning work. After his funeral, it had disappeared. I've been looking for that watch for 15 years, I whispered. Eleanor nodded. Your grandfather asked me to keep it. He said I'd know when it was time to return it. She placed it in my hand. Inside the lid were 6 engraved words. Trust actions. Never trust appearances. I closed my eyes. That was him. Even his advice sounded like a business lesson. Eleanor looked around the vault. So, you've already found Project Phoenix. I nodded. What is it? She smiled sadly. It isn't a revenge plan. It's a survival plan. She walked to one of the shelves. From a locked drawer, she removed another file. This one was much thinner. Across the cover, one name was written in black ink. David Ryland. I frowned. I don't know anyone named David Ryland. You will. She handed me the file. The Ashfords think Richard built the company. He didn't. I blinked. What? The Ashfords believe your grandfather saved them. He did. But neither man created the empire. I frowned. Then who did? She looked directly into my eyes. David Ryland. She opened the file. Inside was an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Real estate developer dies in private plane crash." The photograph showed a handsome man in his 40s. Standing beside him was a much younger Richard Ashford, business partner. I looked closer. Richard wasn't standing proudly. He was standing one step behind, almost like an assistant. What am I looking at? Eleanor folded her hands. David Ryland founded the company. Richard managed operations. When David died, everyone assumed Richard inherited everything. I looked confused. Didn't he? She slowly shook her head. No. The company was drowning in debt. Without your grandfather's money, it would have disappeared within months. Lauren leaned forward. So Richard has been lying for decades? Eleanor answered quietly. Not just Richard. Everyone. She handed me another document. It was a private agreement between David Ryland and my grandfather, signed 28 years earlier. The final paragraph caught my attention. If the Ryland family line cannot continue ownership, operational control may pass to Richard Ashford. However, ownership of all secured assets shall remain protected under the Carter Family Trust until otherwise released by the trustee. I slowly lowered the paper. So Richard never actually owned the assets. No. He only managed them. And after grandfather died, I became trustee. Without even knowing it. Eleanor nodded. Exactly. The room fell silent. Everything suddenly made sense. Richard's obsession with documents. Michael's rush to make me sign transfer papers. The missing property deeds. The birthday humiliation. They weren't trying to hurt me emotionally. That was just a bonus. Their real goal was to convince me to sign away the Carter Trust before I discovered its value. Eleanor's expression suddenly changed. She became serious. There's something else. She walked toward an old projector sitting on a shelf. I've never shown this to anyone. She inserted a film reel. The projector hummed to life. A grainy image appeared on the white wall. It was my grandfather, recorded only a few weeks before he died. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. He smiled at the camera. If you're watching this, I wasn't able to tell you everything myself. My throat tightened. Hello, Grandpa, I whispered. He continued. Evelyn, by now you've learned who owns the buildings. But buildings aren't the real empire. I frowned. Not the real empire? He smiled knowingly. The land is valuable. The contracts are powerful. But neither compares to what lies inside Locker 27. I looked at Eleanor. Locker 27? She nodded slowly. I was hoping he wouldn't mention that yet. My grandfather continued. If betrayal reaches this point, open Locker 27 only after you learn who the silent partner is. Silent partner? Another mystery. Another secret. Another piece of a puzzle that seemed endless. Suddenly, a loud alarm echoed throughout the house. Red emergency lights began flashing inside the vault. Lauren jumped. What was that? Eleanor's face turned pale. No. That's impossible. What happened? She looked toward the security monitor mounted beside the vault entrance. The screen displayed the front gate. 3 black SUVs had just smashed through the iron entrance. Men in dark suits poured out. At least a dozen of them. One of them stepped out of the lead vehicle. Even through the grainy camera, I recognized him instantly. Richard Ashford. Standing beside him, Michael. And, behind them, Callista. Richard looked straight into the security camera, as if he knew we were watching. Then he smiled. A cold, confident smile. He slowly raised a folded document toward the camera. Even from the monitor, I could read the title. Court order. My pulse quickened. What is that? Eleanor whispered. If they've obtained what I think they have, they're here to seize everything. Richard folded the document, looked directly into the camera, and said words that none of us should have been able to hear. Yet somehow, the security microphone caught every syllable. Open the vault, Evelyn. Or I'll make sure your grandfather's legacy dies with you. The connection cut to black. The vault fell silent. And for the first time, I realized the Ashfords were no longer hiding behind lies. They had declared war. The security monitor went black. For several long seconds, no one moved. The only sound inside the vault was the slow ticking of my grandfather's pocket watch. Tick, tick, tick. Lauren finally broke the silence. What do we do? I looked at Eleanor. What exactly can that court order do? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to an old filing cabinet and removed a thick leather binder labeled Carter Family Legacy Protocols. She flipped through several pages before stopping. Then she looked up. If Richard truly has a court order, he can legally search the house. But, she smiled faintly, he cannot touch anything inside this vault. I frowned. Why not? Because legally, this vault doesn't exist. Lauren blinked. What? Eleanor nodded. When your grandfather built this room 24 years ago, he registered it as a private historical archive. It isn't listed as part of the estate. It belongs directly to the Carter Family Trust. So unless a judge specifically authorizes access to trust property, they can't enter. A wave of relief washed over me. For about 3 seconds. Then Eleanor added. However, if someone tells them where the entrance is, they won't stop looking. A loud crash echoed through the house. Someone had kicked in the front door. Lauren jumped. They're inside. Heavy footsteps spread throughout the mansion. One group upstairs. Another downstairs. They were searching every room. Richard hadn't come alone. He'd brought professionals. On the security monitor, I watched Michael enter the library. He looked around slowly, almost sadly. For a brief moment, I wondered if there was still guilt buried somewhere inside him. Then Callista walked beside him. She slipped her arm around his. The moment passed. Richard's voice echoed through the library. I know she's here. One of the men replied. We've searched the East Wing. Nothing. Another shouted. Kitchen is clear. Richard remained calm. She won't argue. She's too smart. Then he smiled. And she's too curious. Inside the vault, I whispered. He's right. Lauren stared at me. What? I won't run. She looked horrified. Evelyn, those people humiliated you. They're trying to steal everything. Why would you stay? I looked around the vault. My grandfather didn't spend decades preparing for this. So I could escape through a back door. Eleanor smiled proudly. For the first time. You sound exactly like him. She walked toward another steel cabinet. Unlike the others, it required 3 different keys. She unlocked the first, then the second, then pressed her thumb against a small brass plate. Click. The cabinet slowly opened. Inside, there wasn't money. There weren't jewels. Instead, there were dozens of sealed envelopes. Every envelope had a date. Some dated 20 years ago. Some 10. Some 5. Each one contained instruction. Lauren picked one up carefully. What are these? Eleanor answered quietly. Predictions. I frowned. What do you mean? Your grandfather believed people always repeat the same mistakes. So, he wrote letters describing what each member of the Ashford family would eventually do. I grabbed the envelope labeled Michael Ashford. The seal had never been broken. Inside, a single page. It read, if Michael ever asks Evelyn to sign documents without giving her enough time to review them, do not sign. That day will mark the beginning of his betrayal. I looked at the date. Written 19 years earlier. 19 years before the documents Michael had wanted me to sign. I felt goosebumps cover my arms. How? Lauren whispered. How could anyone predict something like this? Eleanor smiled. He didn't predict paperwork. He predicted character. Before anyone could speak, the house shook. A heavy object slammed against the library wall. Another crash. Then another. Richard wasn't searching anymore. He was tearing the house apart. Books crashed to the floor. Glass shattered. Furniture splintered. Over the security speaker, We heard Callista laugh. If there's a secret room, we'll find it. My hands curled into fists. This wasn't just a house. It was my grandfather's legacy. His memories. His life. And they were destroying it. Then, Michael spoke. Stop. Everyone froze. Even Richard looked at him. Michael stepped forward. We're making too much damage. Richard's eyes narrowed. I don't care about the furniture. Michael lowered his voice. Evelyn loved this house. Richard exploded. I don't care what Evelyn loved. The words echoed through every speaker. Then he pointed directly toward Michael. If you hadn't failed to get her signature, we wouldn't be here. Silence. My heart pounded. So it was true. Everything. The birthday. The apology. The vacation. The transfer documents. Every word. Every smile. Every kiss. Had been about one thing. My signature. Tears filled my eyes. Not because I was heartbroken anymore. Because I finally understood. I had never lost my marriage tonight. I'd lost it months ago. I just hadn't known. Suddenly, a loud electronic beep echoed through the vault. One of the old monitors flickered to life by itself. Across the screen appeared a single message in green letters. Locker 27 has been accessed. I stared at the screen. What? Eleanor's face turned white. No. That's impossible. You said no one knew about Locker 27. I thought no one did. Another message appeared. Authorized user verified. Then, one final line. The one that made every hair on my neck stand up. Welcome back, Daniel Ryland. The room fell silent. Lauren whispered. Who's Daniel Ryland? Eleanor slowly sank into a chair. I prayed. You would never hear that name. I looked at her. Tell me. She shook her head. No. You need to see him yourself. Because if Daniel Ryland has returned. She swallowed hard. Then your grandfather's greatest secret just walked back into your life. No one spoke. The monitor continued displaying the same message. Welcome back, Daniel Ryland. The green letters glowed in the darkness like a warning. Lauren looked from the screen to Eleanor. Who is Daniel Ryland? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slowly removed her glasses, closed her eyes, and whispered. I prayed this day would never come. I walked toward her. Eleanor, tell me the truth. She looked at me with tired eyes. The truth is far more dangerous than revenge. She pointed toward the monitor. Daniel Ryland isn't supposed to be alive. I frowned. What do you mean? She took a slow breath. 22 years ago, the newspapers reported that David Ryland died in a private plane crash. I know. You showed me the article. She nodded. But the newspapers only told half the story. There were 2 passengers on that plane. I felt my pulse quicken. The second passenger was David's 9-year-old son, Daniel. Lauren whispered. But if he was only 9, he should be in his 30s now. Eleanor nodded. 34. And according to every official record, he died beside his father. Silence. Then I asked the question none of us could ignore. If Daniel died, who just opened Locker 27? Eleanor looked directly into my eyes. Someone the trust recognized. She hurried toward another cabinet and pulled out an old family album. The first pages contained photographs of elegant parties, construction sites, and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Then she stopped. A picture slipped from between the pages. A smiling little boy, standing beside my grandfather. He couldn't have been older than 10. Curly brown hair, bright blue eyes, a baseball glove tucked under one arm. Behind them, a much younger Richard Ashford smiled for the camera. That's Daniel, Eleanor whispered. I stared at the photograph. Something about the boy looked strangely familiar. Not his face. His smile. Where had I seen it before? Then it hit me. I grabbed another photograph from Project Phoenix. Michael, standing beside Richard during a charity event. The same confident smile. The same posture. The same slight dimple on the left cheek. No, I whispered. Lauren frowned. What? They look alike. She compared both pictures. Her eyes widened. They really do. Not identical, but close enough to raise questions. Before any of us could speak, the vault lights suddenly flickered. A mechanical voice echoed through hidden speakers. Identity verification complete. A second later, a wall on the opposite side of the vault slowly slid open. None of us had touched anything. Behind it was a smaller room. At the center stood a single steel locker. Number 27. So, Lauren whispered. That's locker 27. The lock on the door turned by itself. Click. The locker slowly opened. Inside, there was no cash, no gold, no jewelry, only 3 objects. A leather journal, a sealed envelope, and an old VHS videotape. The envelope was addressed to me. I carefully opened it. Inside was another letter from my grandfather. Evelyn, if locker 27 has opened, then Daniel has either returned, or someone has convinced the trust they are Daniel. Before you trust anyone, watch the tape. Lauren looked around. Do we even have a VHS player? Eleanor smiled. Your grandfather thought of everything. She opened a cabinet beneath the table. Inside sat an old television and a perfectly preserved VHS player. Minutes later, the tape began to play. Static filled the screen. Then, my grandfather appeared. He looked older than in the previous recording. He smiled gently. If you're watching this, then events unfolded almost exactly as I expected. I leaned closer. I wish I could tell you this face to face, but time wasn't on my side. He paused. Then his expression became serious. First, Richard Ashford did not build his empire. You already know that. Second, your marriage was never the true target. I frowned. What? He continued. They married you because they believed one day you would inherit the Carter Trust. My heart stopped. So Michael hadn't fallen in love with me by accident. He had pursued me because of my inheritance. I clenched my fists. Every anniversary, every promise, every I love you. Had it all been planned? Grandfather answered as if he could hear my thoughts. No. Michael loved you. My eyes widened. He truly did. For a time. But some men love power more than people. And eventually, they choose power. A tear rolled down my cheek. Because somehow, that hurt even more than believing he'd never loved me. The recording continued. Finally, there is one person you must find before Richard does. Daniel Ryland. If Daniel is alive, he is the only witness who knows what really happened the night of the plane crash. The screen suddenly distorted. Static filled the room. The image returned for just 1 second. Long enough for my grandfather to say 4 words. Richard didn't save him. The tape abruptly stopped. The television went black. No ending. No explanation. Nothing. Only those 4 unfinished words. Lauren stared at the blank screen. What was he going to say? Before anyone could answer, a phone began ringing somewhere inside the vault. Not my phone. Not Lauren's. An old black rotary telephone mounted on the wall. It shouldn't have worked. The line had been disconnected years ago. Yet it kept ringing. Once. Twice. 3 times. Eleanor whispered. Answer it. I slowly lifted the receiver. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a man's calm voice spoke. Hello, Evelyn. I froze. I've waited 15 years for this conversation. My heart pounded. Who is this? The man chuckled softly. Then he answered. My name is Daniel Ryland. Another pause. Then he said the words that changed everything. And Richard Ashford has been trying to kill me ever since I was 9 years old. The voice on the telephone was calm, steady, almost comforting. But the words he had just spoken made my blood run cold. My name is Daniel Ryland. Richard Ashford has been trying to kill me ever since I was 9 years old. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Lauren and Eleanor stared at me. They couldn't hear the voice, only my side of the conversation. Finally, I whispered, How do I know you're really Daniel? The man chuckled softly. Because I'm about to tell you something no one else knows. He paused. When you were 6 years old, You stole 2 chocolate cookies from your grandfather's kitchen. I frowned. What? You hid under the library desk because you thought he'd punish you. Instead, he sat beside you and ate the second cookie. A lump formed in my throat. Nobody knew that story. Nobody. Except me. And my grandfather. Who are you? I whispered again. I already told you. I'm Daniel. Your grandfather became my guardian after the crash. The room spun. Guardian? Eleanor suddenly grabbed the phone from my hand. Daniel. The man's voice immediately softened. Eleanor. It's been a long time. Tears filled her eyes. You stayed away. I had to. They were watching. I took the receiver back. What really happened on that plane? There was a long silence. Then Daniel spoke. It wasn't an accident. Every muscle in my body tensed. The aircraft was sabotaged. My father discovered something. Something Richard Ashford couldn't allow anyone else to know. What did he discover? He discovered that Richard had been stealing from investors for years. I closed my eyes. Of course. Greed. It always came back to greed. Daniel continued. My father planned to expose him, but he never got the chance. I heard him take a slow breath. I remember the explosion. I remember the smoke. My father pulled me toward the emergency exit. He pushed me out. I landed in the river. My father. He never made it. His voice cracked for the first time. I never saw him again. What happened after that? Someone found me. Your grandfather. I looked toward Eleanor. She nodded silently. It's true. Daniel continued. Edward Carter hid me. He knew Richard would finish the job if he learned I survived. So, he gave me another name. Another identity. I had disappeared. For 25 years. My mind was racing. If you've been alive all this time, why come back now? His answer was immediate. Because Richard crossed a line. What line? He came after you. Those words settled heavily in my chest. Daniel continued. Your grandfather made me promise something. If Richard ever betrayed you, I was to return. I've kept that promise. Before I could ask another question, a loud bang echoed from upstairs. The entire vault trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Lauren looked at the security monitor. Oh no. Richard's men had discovered something. One of the bookshelves in the library had shifted slightly during their search. Not enough to reveal the entrance, but enough to make Richard suspicious. He pointed directly at the shelf. Move every book. On the monitor, 5 men began emptying the shelves. Hundreds of books crashed onto the floor. Richard watched patiently. He smiled. She's close. I can feel it. Back on the phone, Daniel's voice became urgent. Evelyn, listen carefully. You have less than 10 minutes. What do you mean? They'll find the entrance. My heart started pounding. Then what do we do? There's another exit. I looked around. I don't see one. You won't. It's behind the map. Eleanor immediately walked to a giant framed map of New York hanging on the vault wall. She pressed one corner. Nothing happened. Daniel spoke again. Not that corner. The Hudson River. Eleanor pressed the river. A hidden latch clicked. The map slowly swung open. Behind it, a narrow tunnel stretched into darkness. Lauren gasped. Your grandfather really planned for everything. Daniel continued. Follow that tunnel. It leads to the old boathouse. I'll meet you there. How will I recognize you? He laughed quietly. You won't. I'll recognize you. The line went dead. I slipped the phone back onto its cradle. For a brief moment, no one moved. Then Eleanor walked over to me. She placed both hands on my shoulders. Your grandfather trusted very few people. He trusted Daniel. If Daniel says go, we go. I nodded. But before leaving, I looked back at the vault. At the letters. The journals. The history of my family. Everything my grandfather had protected. I whispered softly, I'll come back. Then I turned off the lights. The vault disappeared into darkness. Perhaps for the last time. We stepped into the tunnel. The stone passage was cold and damp. Only our flashlights guided the way. Behind us, A deafening crash echoed through the mansion. Richard's men had finally moved the bookshelf. They had found the hidden staircase. Richard's triumphant voice echoed faintly through the tunnel. "She's here. Seal every exit." Lauren looked at me in panic. "They're coming." I took a deep breath. "No," I said quietly. "They're chasing the woman they think they know." I tightened my grip on my grandfather's pocket watch. But they're about to meet the woman who owns everything. The tunnel seemed endless. Cold stone walls surrounded us. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling. Each echo sounded like footsteps behind us. Lauren kept looking over her shoulder. "They're getting closer." I didn't answer. I could hear them too. Faint voices. Metal scraping against stone. Richard's men had entered the hidden staircase. They just hadn't found the tunnel yet. After nearly 15 minutes of walking, a faint blue light appeared ahead. Fresh air rushed toward us. Eleanor smiled for the first time that night. We made it. The tunnel opened into an old wooden boathouse overlooking a quiet lake. Morning sunlight shimmered across the water. For one brief moment, everything felt peaceful. Too peaceful. There was only one boat tied to the dock. And beside it, a man stood with his back to us. Tall, broad shoulders, dark gray coat, hands in his pockets. He didn't turn around. Instead, he said quietly, "I was beginning to think you'd never come." The voice. It was the same one from the telephone. I stepped forward. "Daniel." He nodded. Slowly, he turned around. He looked to be in his mid-30s. Short dark hair, blue eyes, a neatly trimmed beard. There was something strangely familiar about him. Not because I had seen him before, but because he looked exactly like the little boy in the photograph. Only older. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. "Hello, Evelyn. I'm sorry we had to meet like this." I searched his face. "You're really Daniel Ryland." He nodded. "I wish we had met years ago." Before I could respond, he pulled a worn leather wallet from his coat. Inside, he handed me an old photograph. It showed my grandfather, standing between two children. Me, at 7 years old, and Daniel, about 10. My eyes widened. "I don't remember this." "You wouldn't. Your grandfather told everyone I was the gardener's nephew. So Richard never knew I was alive." Eleanor quietly wiped away a tear. "I watched both of you play in this very boathouse." Daniel smiled. "You used to beat me at chess." I laughed softly. "I've never played chess." "You did. You just don't remember." Then, his smile disappeared. "We don't have much time." He reached into the boat and removed a black briefcase. He placed it on the table. "What is it?" "Evidence." He unlocked it. Inside were dozens of files. Original bank transfers, insurance records, photographs, audio cassettes, and one thick folder marked Ashford offshore accounts. Lauren stared in disbelief. "Where did you get all this?" Daniel answered calmly. "I've spent 25 years collecting it." He opened one document. This transfer happened 3 days before the plane crash. Richard Ashford had secretly transferred millions of dollars from investor accounts into shell companies. Another document. Insurance policies. The beneficiary, Richard Ashford. If David Ryland died, Richard became acting CEO. Another file. Construction loans. Forged signatures. Fake board resolutions. Money laundering. Fraud. Tax evasion. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. Daniel leaned closer. "Evelyn, Richard doesn't just want the Carter Trust. He needs it." "Why?" "Because without those properties, the banks will discover the fraud. They'll call in every loan, and the entire empire collapses." For the first time, everything connected. The birthday humiliation, the fake apology, the rushed documents, the vacation, the court order. None of it had been personal. Not at first. It had all been desperation. Richard wasn't protecting an empire. He was hiding a collapse. Suddenly, a loud engine roared across the lake. Lauren looked through the window. Her face turned white. "They found us." 3 black speedboats were racing across the water. Each carried armed security contractors. Richard stood at the front of the lead boat. Even from a distance, his expression was filled with rage. Daniel looked at his watch. "They're early." "How?" He frowned. "Someone knew we'd come here." Silence filled the room. There were only 4 people who knew about the tunnel. Me, Lauren, Eleanor, Daniel. No one spoke. No one moved. Then, a mobile phone vibrated. Not mine. Not Daniel's. Not Eleanor's. Lauren slowly reached into her handbag. Her face drained of color. The screen displayed a single message. "Thank you for leading us to her." I stared at Lauren. She looked horrified. "No. I swear, I've never seen this number before." Another message appeared. "Payment sent. Check your account." Daniel quietly closed the briefcase. His voice was calm. Too calm. "There are only 2 possibilities." Lauren looked ready to cry. "What?" "Either someone is framing you." He paused. "Or someone much closer to Richard has been watching all of us." Outside, the speedboat slammed against the dock. Men jumped ashore. Richard stepped onto the wooden pier. He looked directly at the boathouse. Then, with a slow smile, he raised a megaphone. His voice echoed across the lake. "Evelyn, you have 1 minute to come outside." He paused, then delivered the cruelest threat yet. "If you don't, I'll burn your grandfather's house to the ground." The boathouse fell silent. I looked at the flames of sunrise reflecting on the water, then at the pocket watch in my hand. Finally, I made a decision. A decision that would change all of our lives forever. Richard's voice echoed across the lake. "You have 1 minute, or I'll burn your grandfather's house to the ground." The boathouse fell silent. Lauren looked terrified. "We can't let him destroy it." Daniel shook his head. "He won't." I looked at him. "How can you be so sure?" "Because Richard doesn't destroy evidence. He steals it. He needs what's inside that house." I nodded slowly. He was right. The mansion wasn't the target. The Carter Trust was. The letters. The contracts. The vault. Everything Richard had failed to find. I looked at everyone in the room. Lauren. Eleanor. Daniel. Then I made my decision. "I'm going outside." Lauren grabbed my arm. "Absolutely not. He'll arrest you." Daniel stepped forward. "No. He won't." Richard couldn't. Not yet. Without my signature. Without the Carter Trust. His empire would collapse within weeks. I was worth more to him alive than dead. I slipped my grandfather's pocket watch into my coat. Then I handed the black briefcase to Daniel. "If anything happens to me, finish what my grandfather started." Daniel looked into my eyes. "I won't let you face him alone." "You already are." I smiled faintly. "You've spent 25 years running. It's my turn." I opened the boathouse door. The morning air was cold. Richard stood at the end of the dock. Perfect suit. Perfect tie. Perfect smile. Behind him, more than 20 men. Lawyers. Private security. 2 police officers. And Michael. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept all night. When our eyes met, he took one hesitant step toward me. "Evelyn." Richard raised a hand. Michael stopped immediately. Interesting. Even now, Michael obeyed his father. I walked calmly onto the dock. The lake behind me. Richard in front of me. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, he smiled. "I knew you'd come." I smiled back. "I knew you'd threaten something I loved." He laughed. "We understand each other." "No." I replied quietly. "I finally understand you." Richard removed a folded document from his briefcase. "The court has authorized an emergency review of the Carter Trust." I took the papers. "Read every page." Then, I laughed. Not loudly. Just enough to confuse everyone. Richard frowned. "Ugh. That's funny." I looked directly into his eyes. "This order isn't for the Carter Trust." His smile faded. "It's for the Ashford Group." Silence. I turned the document around so everyone could see. The judge authorized an audit of corporate assets. Not trust assets. "You've brought the wrong paperwork." Richard's lawyer quickly grabbed the papers. His face turned pale. He whispered something into Richard's ear. Richard snatched the documents back. He flipped through every page. For the first time, his hands trembled. He had been in such a hurry. He hadn't even read his own court order. I folded the papers neatly, then handed them back. You've always believed confidence could replace preparation. Today, it can't. Behind Richard, several of the police officers exchanged uncertain glances. One of them quietly asked the lawyer, "So, we don't have authority to search trust property?" The lawyer didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Richard's expression hardened. "This changes nothing. It changes everything," I answered. "You've trespassed on private property. You've damaged a protected historical estate. You've attempted to seize assets you don't legally own." His jaw tightened. "You think you've won?" "No. I think you're losing." Suddenly, Michael stepped forward. "Dad." Richard ignored him. Michael tried again. "Dad. This has gone too far." Richard slowly turned. "What did you say?" Michael swallowed. "Evelyn isn't the enemy." Richard's face twisted with anger. "You fool. If she keeps that trust, we lose everything." Michael looked at me, then back at his father. For the first time, I saw genuine confusion in his eyes. "What do you mean? We lose everything?" Richard froze. He had said too much. Michael frowned. "Dad, what are you telling me?" The silence was broken by another sound. Not from the dock. From the road above the lake. Dozens of black luxury sedans appeared. One after another. 10, 15, 20. Every vehicle carried the logo of a different bank. Daniel stepped quietly out of the boathouse, still holding the black briefcase. Richard's face instantly lost all color. "No," he whispered. "They're here already?" Daniel smiled. "They're not here for Evelyn." He raised the briefcase. "They're here because every major lender received this at exactly 8 o'clock this morning." Richard stared at him. "What did you send?" Daniel answered calmly. 25 years of evidence." The lead sedan stopped. A gray-haired woman in a navy business suit stepped out. Behind her came representatives from 6 international banks, then federal investigators, then financial crime officers. The woman adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Richard. "Mr. Ashford, my name is Margaret Collins, Special Director of the National Financial Crimes Bureau." She opened a folder. Her voice was calm. "You're under investigation for securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." Richard took one slow step backward. "No." She continued reading. "And based on new evidence submitted this morning, we have also reopened the investigation into the Ryland plane crash." The dock fell completely silent. Michael slowly turned toward his father. His lips barely moved. "You told me it was an accident." Richard said nothing. For the first time in his life, the man who always had an answer had none. Richard Ashford didn't run. He didn't argue. He simply stood on the dock, watching the investigators surround him. For the first time in 30 years, the most powerful man in the room wasn't speaking. He was listening. Michael stared at his father. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "You told me the Ryland accident was investigated." Richard remained silent. "You told me there was nothing to hide." Still, nothing. The silence answered every question. Special Director Margaret Collins stepped forward. "Mr. Ashford, I advise you not to say anything until your attorney is present." Richard slowly smiled. It wasn't confidence. It was desperation. "You have no case." Margaret calmly opened another folder. "We didn't yesterday." She looked toward Daniel. "We do today." Daniel handed her the black briefcase. She removed several files. One by one. Original offshore account records. Forged board resolutions. Insurance payout agreements. Then, she lifted a faded cassette tape. And an audio recording made 26 years ago. Richard's face turned ghostly white. "No," he whispered. "That recording was destroyed." Daniel answered quietly. "You destroyed the copy. My father kept the original." The investigators inserted the tape into a portable recorder. Static filled the air. Then, two voices. David Ryland and Richard Ashford. David's voice was calm. "I'm reporting everything to the authorities tomorrow." Richard laughed. "You won't get the chance." A long silence followed. Then Richard said 7 words that froze everyone on the dock. "Some accidents are easy to arrange." The tape ended. No one spoke. Not even the wind seemed to move. Michael slowly stepped backward. His eyes never left his father. "You." His voice broke. "You murdered him?" Richard finally exploded. "I saved this company." His voice echoed across the lake. "You have no idea what I sacrificed." Daniel stepped forward. "My father. You sacrificed my father." Richard looked directly at Daniel. "I should have finished the job." Gasps spread through the crowd. Even Richard's own attorney closed his eyes. He knew. His client had just destroyed his own defense. Federal agents immediately stepped forward. "Richard Ashford, you're under arrest." They secured his hands behind H's back. This time, he didn't resist. But before they could escort him away, Richard turned toward me. His eyes burned with hatred. "You think you've won?" I met his gaze. "I didn't come here to win. I came here for the truth." He laughed bitterly. "The truth? The truth is your husband helped me." The world seemed to stop. I looked at Michael. He looked just as shocked. "What?" Richard smiled cruelly. "You signed every financial report." Michael shook his head. "I trusted you. You told me they were legal." Richard shrugged. "Trust is expensive." Michael's knees nearly gave out. 4 years. He hadn't been running the company. He'd been unknowingly helping conceal a crime. Daniel quietly placed a hand on my shoulder. He knew about the affair. He knew about the humiliation. But I don't believe he knew about the murder. I looked at Michael. For the first time, I saw not the arrogant executive. Not the husband who betrayed me. Just a broken man. Realizing that the father he admired had manipulated him his entire life. As investigators escorted Richard toward an armored vehicle, he suddenly stopped. He turned one last time. Not toward me. Toward Daniel. Then he smiled. A slow, satisfied smile. "You still don't know." Daniel frowned. "Know what?" Richard laughed. "The biggest lie was never mine." He climbed into the vehicle. The door slammed shut. The convoy drove away, leaving behind only silence. Lauren looked confused. What did he mean? Daniel stared at the road. His expression had changed. He looked afraid. Truly afraid. I touched his arm. "Daniel," he whispered. "Locker 27. What about it?" "My father left one document I never found." Eleanor slowly closed her eyes. "Oh no." "What?" She looked at both of us. If Richard was smiling, it means he thinks we still haven't discovered the final secret. That evening, we returned to the Carter vault. The investigators had sealed the mansion as a protected crime scene, but with the trust documents and Colin's authorization, we were allowed inside. The hidden room was exactly as we'd left it. Except, locker 27. Its door was open. The leather journal was gone. The envelope was gone. Only one object remained. A small brass key. Attached to it was a handwritten note. In my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. "If you have reached this point, then you still don't know who betrayed you first." A cold chill ran down my spine. I looked at Daniel. He looked at me. Neither of us spoke. Because we both realized the same terrifying possibility. Richard Ashford might not have been the first traitor. Someone else, someone much closer, had started everything. And they were still free. The brass key felt cold in my hand. Tiny. Ordinary. Yet somehow, it carried more weight than every document we'd uncovered. Aired so far. Attached to it was my grandfather's note. "If you have reached this point, then you still don't know who betrayed you first." I read it again. Then again. None of it made sense. Richard had stolen, leaked, manipulated, possibly arranged David Ryland's death. If he wasn't the first traitor, then who was? Daniel slowly sat down at the oak table. For the first time since we'd met. He looked defeated. I've searched for that journal for 25 years. I looked at him. What was inside it? My father's personal diary. He wrote in it every night. Lauren frowned. Why is that diary so important? Daniel answered quietly. Because the last entry was written the night before the plane crash. Eleanor suddenly stood. Wait. She walked toward one of the oldest bookshelves. There was another hiding place. What? Edward never trusted just one secret compartment. She ran her fingers along the wooden shelf. Nothing. Then, she gently pulled an old leather-bound Bible. A soft click echoed through the vault. A narrow drawer slid open beneath the shelf. Inside, there was only one envelope. Yellow with age. Across the front, 3 words. Open last. My heartbeat quickened. This must be it. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside, another handwritten letter. Not from my grandfather. From David Ryland. Daniel immediately recognized the handwriting. His voice trembled. That's my father's writing. I unfolded the pages. The letter was dated 3 days before the plane crash. It began, Edward, if you're reading this, then my instincts were correct. Someone inside my own company has betrayed me. I looked at Daniel. So your father already knew. Daniel nodded slowly. He suspected someone. I continued reading. I know Richard is stealing money. But Richard isn't intelligent enough to build this scheme alone. Someone else designed it. The room fell silent. Someone else? Lauren whispered. So Richard wasn't the mastermind? David's letter answered her. The real danger isn't the man signing the papers. It's the one teaching him which papers to sign. A chill ran down my spine. I kept reading. If anything happens to me, don't waste your time looking only at Richard. Follow the lawyer. Daniel's eyes widened. No. Eleanor covered her mouth. Oh, Edward. I looked up. What lawyer? Eleanor whispered one name. Harold Benson. The Ashford family's attorney. The man who had worked for Richard for over 30 years. The man who had prepared every contract. Every trust amendment. Every corporate restructuring. Every signature. Every legal opinion. I remembered him instantly. Gray hair. Perfect suits. Soft voice. Always smiling. Always invisible. Daniel stood so quickly his chair fell backward. It can't be. Eleanor nodded sadly. It can. Harold joined the company before Richard became CEO. He can. Every secret. He wrote every agreement. If anyone understood how to steal an empire, it was him. I quickly searched through Project Phoenix. There. A thin file. Almost forgotten. Harold Benson. Inside. Only 2 pages. No photograph. No investigation. Just one handwritten sentence from my grandfather. Never underestimate the quietest man in the room. My phone suddenly vibrated. An unknown email had arrived. No subject. Only one attachment. Security_footage_1999 MP4. No sender. No message. Just the video. Daniel frowned. I didn't send that. Lauren shook her head. Neither did I. Eleanor looked genuinely confused. Who else knows about us? I pressed play. The footage was grainy. Black and white. A parking garage. Date stamp. May 17th, 1999. The night before the plane crash. A black sedan pulled into the garage. David Ryland stepped out. A second man approached him. The image was blurry. Too blurry to recognize. The 2 men argued. David handed him a thick folder. The other man refused. Then, just before walking away, the security camera caught his face. Everyone in the room gasped. It wasn't Richard. It wasn't Harold Benson. It was Michael's mother, Margaret Ashford. No. I whispered. The video continued. Margaret looked terrified. She grabbed David's arm. He shook his head. Then he said something. There was no audio. Only silent movement. Margaret began crying. She covered her face. David walked away. Margaret remained standing, watching him leave. The timestamp ended. Lauren stared at the frozen frame. What does this mean? Daniel looked completely stunned. My mother. He stopped himself. No. He whispered. I remember. What? When I was little, my father used to call Margaret the only honest Ashford. Silence. Then Daniel slowly looked at me. If she met him secretly, maybe she wasn't helping Richard. Maybe she was trying to stop him. Before anyone could respond, the vault's old telephone rang again. Once, twice, 3 times. I answered immediately. Hello. A familiar male voice spoke. Calm, measured, confident. Good evening, Evelyn. My blood ran cold. I recognized that voice. Not from today. From years ago. Every contract. Every board meeting. Every legal briefing. The Ashford family lawyer. Harold Benson. He chuckled softly. I see you've finally started asking the right questions. I gripped the receiver. Where's David's journal? Another quiet laugh. Safe. With you. Of course. My heart pounded. Why are you telling me this? His tone became colder. Because Richard was never my client. A long pause. Then he spoke the sentence that changed everything. I don't work for the Ashfords, Evelyn. The Ashfords have always worked for me. The line went dead. I slowly lowered the receiver. No one spoke. Because we all understood. Richard Ashford had never been the man at the top. He had only been the face of the empire. The real architect had been hiding behind a lawyer's desk for 30 years. And now, he finally knew we were coming for him. The dial tone hummed in my ear. Slow. Steady. Mocking. I lowered the receiver without saying a word. Lauren was the first to break the silence. What did he say? I looked at Daniel. Then at Eleanor. Finally I spoke. It was Harold Benson. Daniel's expression darkened. What did he want? I swallowed. He said. Richard was never his client. Lauren frowned. What does that mean? I took a slow breath. He said. The Ashfords have always worked for me. The room fell silent. Eleanor slowly sank into a chair. I was afraid of this. Daniel looked at her. You knew. She shook her head. I suspected. Edward suspected too. But we never had proof. Daniel walked to the wall where old company photographs were hanging. He pointed to one taken nearly 30 years earlier. David Ryland stood in the center. Richard Ashford stood beside him. Behind them, almost hidden, was Harold Benson, holding a folder, watching everyone. Smiling. Daniel whispered. He's in every photograph. Lauren looked closer. Oh my God. He really is. Not once. Not twice. Every major company event. Every celebration. Every groundbreaking ceremony. Harold never stood in front. He always stood behind. Quiet. Patient. Invisible. I suddenly remembered something. When I became chief financial officer. Who recommended me? Lauren answered immediately. Harold. I froze. When Michael proposed. Who prepared our prenuptial agreement? Harold. When grandfather died. Who handled probate? Harold. When the trust documents were supposedly updated. Daniel finished my sentence. Harold. A chill ran through the room. He hadn't appeared occasionally. He had been present. At every turning point of my life. Eleanor opened another cabinet. There may still be something Edward left about Harold. After several minutes, she found a sealed notebook. Unlike the others, it wasn't labeled with a name. Only one sentence. The man who never wanted credit. Inside, every page contained observations. Not accusations. Patterns. One entry caught my attention. Harold never asks for power. He simply arranges for powerful men to depend on him. Another. Richard believes he controls Harold. Michael believes he controls the company. Both are wrong. Then, the final entry. Written only weeks before my grandfather died. If Harold ever reveals himself, it means he believes no one can stop him anymore. Daniel slowly closed the notebook. He isn't hiding anymore. No. I replied quietly. He's inviting us. Just then, Margaret Collins entered the vault. Her coat was oaked from the rain outside. She looked exhausted. "I've been trying to reach you." She noticed our expressions. "What happened?" I handed her the notebook. "And Harold called." Her eyes narrowed immediately. "He contacted you directly?" I nodded. She didn't look surprised. Instead, she sighed. "We were afraid of that." Daniel frowned. "You knew about him?" Margaret nodded. "For years. But every investigation ended the same way." "What do you mean?" She opened her own case file. Every witness disappeared. Every financial record vanished. Every whistleblower withdrew their statement. Lauren whispered. "He cleaned everything up." Margaret nodded. "That's what lawyers do. They don't always commit the crime. They make sure no one can prove it." She placed a photograph on the table. A private airport. 5 years earlier, Harold Benson was boarding a jet. Standing beside him, a man I had never seen before. "Who is that?" Margaret answered. "His real client." The name beneath the photograph made Daniel stop breathing. "Victor Langford." Daniel whispered. "No." Eleanor closed her eyes. "I should have remembered." Lauren looked confused. "Who's Victor Langford?" Daniel answered quietly. "David Ryland's older brother." The room went completely silent. "What?" I asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "My uncle. He disappeared after my father's death. We all believed he'd moved overseas." Margaret shook her head. "He didn't disappear. He changed his name, built an international investment network, and for the last 25 years, he's been financing Harold Benson." I stared at the photograph. Nothing made sense anymore. If Victor is David's brother, why destroy his own family's company? Daniel looked as confused as I was. "He wouldn't." Margaret slowly slid another document across the table. A birth certificate. I read it once, then again. The words blurred. Because the father's name wasn't Ryland. It was Langford. Margaret looked directly at me. Victor Langford wasn't David's brother. He was his half-brother. And according to our investigation, they spent 20 years fighting over the Ryland inheritance. Daniel whispered. "My father never told me." Margaret nodded. Very few people knew. Before anyone could speak, the vault lights suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. A backup generator clicked on. Red emergency lights flickered. Then, every monitor inside the vault came to life at once. On every screen, the same image appeared. Harold Benson, sitting calmly in a leather chair, as if he had been expecting us. He smiled. "Good evening." No one answered. He folded his hands. "I've waited 30 years for someone intelligent enough to solve Edward Carter's puzzles." He looked directly into the camera. "Evelyn, you've done remarkably well." His smile widened. "But you've made one fatal mistake." I stepped closer to the screen. "What mistake?" Harold's eyes gleamed. "You assumed you were chasing me." He leaned forward, then spoke the words that made the entire room freeze. "I'm not running anymore. Because I've already won." The screens went black. At that exact moment, Margaret Collins' phone rang. She answered. Her face lost all color. She slowly lowered the phone and looked at us. "What happened?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "The federal evidence warehouse just burned to the ground. Daniel's briefcase, the original tapes, the financial records, everything that had been seized after Richard's arrest, had been stored there. And now, according to the first reports, every piece of evidence had been destroyed." Margaret Collins stood frozen. Her phone slipped from her hand onto the stone floor. No one dared pick it up. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Say it again." Margaret swallowed hard. "The federal evidence warehouse is gone. Fire crews are still trying to control the blaze." Lauren's voice trembled. "Our evidence." Margaret slowly nodded. "Everything we submitted this morning. The recordings. The financial files. The original ledgers. Everything." Daniel closed his eyes. 25 years. 25 years of collecting proof. Reduced to ashes. For several minutes, no one spoke. Then, Eleanor did something unexpected. She laughed. Not loudly. Not hysterically. Just a quiet laugh. Everyone looked at her. Daniel frowned. Eleanor. She smiled. You still underestimate Edward Carter. I looked at her. What do you mean? She pointed toward my grandfather's old pocket watch. He planned for fires. I frowned. How could anyone plan for this? She smiled. Because Harold Benson always destroys evidence. He always has. She looked directly at me. Edward knew that. She walked to another shelf inside the vault. Hidden behind a row of dusty accounting books was a small iron safe. Unlike every other lock, this one required no key. Only the pocket watch. I carefully inserted it. Click. The safe opened. Inside were dozens of tiny black memory cards, each carefully numbered. Lauren stared. What are these? Eleanor smiled proudly. Insurance. Daniel picked one up. It was labeled Ryland Case, Master Copy. Another. Ashford Offshore Accounts, Master Copy. Another. Project Phoenix, Original Recordings. Daniel looked at me in disbelief. My father always made duplicates. Eleanor shook her head. No. Edward did. Inside the safe, a final envelope rested beneath the memory cards. Across the front, my grandfather had written, If Harold burns the evidence. I slowly opened it. Inside, one sentence. Congratulations. That means you've finally forced him into making his first mistake. Lauren blinked. Burning evidence. Was a mistake. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes. Because now, he admitted the evidence was real. Margaret smiled for the first time all morning. And arson to destroy federal evidence is its own crime. Suddenly, the vault telephone rang. Again. I picked it up immediately. Harold Benson's calm voice returned. I assume you've heard about the warehouse. I have. I'm sorry. He sounded anything but sorry. So many years of work. Gone. I smiled. You sound disappointed. I am. For you. I glanced toward the memory cards. Then decided to bluff. You're right. You destroyed everything. Harold chuckled. I knew Edward would teach you to lie. But not well enough. My smile faded. What do you mean? You just looked toward the backup copies. Every person in the vault froze. Harold couldn't see us. Could he? Then he answered the question none of us had asked. The camera hidden inside Edward's pocket watch still works. I instinctively looked down at the watch. A tiny red light blinked once. Daniel cursed under his breath. He was watching us. Without hesitation, I threw the pocket watch onto the stone floor. Daniel crushed it beneath his heel. The red light disappeared. Harold laughed. Too late. The line went dead. Margaret immediately pulled out her phone. He knows about the copies. We have to move them. Daniel nodded. Now. Just as we began packing the memory cards, the emergency lights flickered. A loud explosion echoed somewhere above us. Dust rained from the ceiling. Lauren looked toward the staircase. They're back. Margaret checked the security monitor. Her face went pale. It isn't Richard's people. Then who? She zoomed in. The vehicles outside weren't black SUVs. They were armored trucks. No company logos. No license plates. At least 30 armed men surrounded the mansion. Professional. Disciplined. Military precision. Daniel whispered one name. Langford. The front door exploded inward. The security cameras shook violently. A man wearing a black tactical uniform walked inside. He removed his sunglasses. Silver hair. Sharp blue eyes. Perfectly tailored suit beneath the tactical vest. He looked directly into the nearest camera. Then smiled. I've spent 30 years cleaning up my brother's mistakes. He paused. His voice calm. Controlled. Deadly. Now, it's time to clean up Harold's. I stared at the screen. That's Victor Langford? Daniel nodded. His face had gone completely pale. Yes. But if Victor is here. He looked straight at me. Then Harold has already betrayed him too. The realization hit us all at once. Harold Benson wasn't loyal to Richard. He wasn't loyal to Victor. He wasn't loyal to anyone. He had been using everyone for decades. Richard, Victor, the Ashfords, even the Rylands, Ennis, Umwer. Behind all of it, there was still one final secret. One secret my grandfather had protected with his life, and Harold was now willing to start a war to obtain it. The image on the monitor froze. Victor Langford stood in the mansion's entrance hall. Behind him, 30 heavily armed men spread through the estate with military precision. They weren't searching randomly. They already knew exactly where to look. Daniel whispered, "We're out of time." Margaret Collins immediately reached for her phone. "I'll call tactical support." "No," Daniel said firmly. "It'll be too late." The vault trembled as another explosion echoed above us. Chunks of stone fell from the ceiling. Lauren looked at me. "What are they after?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward Eleanor. She slowly nodded. "They finally know." I frowned. "Know what?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "The Carter fortune." Lauren looked around the vault. "This." She pointed toward the shelves. "The documents." Eleanor smiled sadly. "No. The documents only protect it." I frowned. "Then what exactly is the Carter fortune?" For several moments, no one spoke. Finally, Eleanor walked toward an old painting hanging above the fireplace. It showed my grandfather standing beside a large oak tree. She carefully lifted the painting off the wall. Hidden behind it was a small brass plaque. Only 4 words were engraved. "Wealth is never gold." Daniel closed his eyes. "My father used to say that." Eleanor nodded. So did Edward. They both believed the same thing. I turned toward her. "Please. No more riddles." She smiled gently. "Very well. The Carter fortune was never money." Silence. Lauren blinked. "What?" Eleanor continued. "Your grandfather became wealthy because he owned land. But land wasn't his greatest achievement." She pointed toward the shelves surrounding us. "Knowledge was." She walked to one of the oldest cabinets. Inside were hundreds of leather-bound journals, everyone carefully labeled. 1968, 1969, 1970, year after year. For over 50 years. Daniel slowly ran his fingers across the spines. "My father wrote journals. So did Edward." Eleanor nodded. "Every negotiation, every business mistake, every investment, every market crash, every political decision. They documented everything." I pulled out one journal. Inside, every page contained handwritten observations. Not numbers. Not profits. Lessons. One entry read, "Never buy property because everyone else wants it. Buy because 10 years from now they'll wonder why they didn't." Another, "Never trust a man who refuses to lose a small argument. He'll sacrifice a great friendship to protect his pride." Another, "Money disappears. Wisdom compounds." I looked up slowly. "This is the fortune." Eleanor smiled. "Exactly." Daniel laughed softly. "My father always joked. If someone stole all his money, he'd earn it back. But if someone stole his experience, he'd truly be poor." Margaret Collins looked around the room. "So Harold doesn't want the property?" "No," Eleanor replied. "He wants something far more valuable." The journals contained strategies that predicted economic cycles, land expansion, infrastructure growth, and investment opportunities decades in advance. Lauren whispered, "He could build another empire." Daniel corrected her. "No, he could build 10. Suddenly, the hidden vault door shook violently. Boom. Another explosion. Dust poured from the ceiling. Victor's men had reached the staircase. Margaret drew her service weapon. "They've breached the lower level." Daniel looked toward me. "Evelyn, listen carefully. If they reach these journals, everything Edward protected dies." I looked around the room. Hundreds of journals. Thousands of pages. A lifetime of knowledge. There was no way we could carry them. Then, I noticed something. Every bookshelf rested on steel rails. "Eleanor, why are the shelves on tracks?" A smile slowly appeared on her face. "You noticed." She walked toward the center of the room. placed both hands on a bronze globe, and turned it exactly 90 degrees. The entire vault began to shake. Lawrence stumbled backward. What's happening? The bookshelves slowly separated, revealing an enormous steel cylinder beneath the floor. Daniel stared in disbelief. I never knew. Eleanor smiled. Edward only told one person. She looked directly at me. And now, too. The cylinder rose from the floor. It looked like the secure vault of an old central bank. A combination dial, massive locking bolts, fireproof steel, waterproof seals, impact-resistant walls. Eleanor entered a long numerical code. The vault opened. Inside, there weren't hundreds of journals. There were only 20, each wrapped in dark blue leather. I frowned. Where's the rest? Eleanor smiled. The others are copies. My heart skipped. What? She nodded. Edward expected thieves. He filled the library with replicas. The real Carter legacy. She gently touched the 20 journals. Has always been here. Daniel carefully picked up the first volume. Across the cover, gold letters shimmered. The Principles of Building Kingdoms. Volume 1. I opened the first page. Instead of business notes, there was a handwritten message. Addressed to me. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading these books, then you have already discovered the greatest lesson I could ever teach. Wealth isn't measured by what you own. It's measured by what you can rebuild after losing everything. A tear rolled down my cheek. I smiled. Grandpa. At that exact moment, the steel door to the vault exploded inward. Smoke filled the room. Armed men rushed inside. Victor Langford stepped through the haze. Elegant. Calm. Smiling. He looked directly at me, then at the blue journals. His eyes lit up. So, he said softly, they really do exist. He took one slow step forward, then another. No one needs to die today. He extended his hand. Give me the journals, and you can keep the empire. I looked at the journals, then at Victor. Then, I smiled, because for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't afraid. I had finally realized something. The Carter legacy wasn't inside those books. It was already inside me. And Victor Langford had just made the same mistake everyone else had. He believed wisdom could be stolen. Victor Langford stood in the center of the vault. His men surrounded us. Automatic rifles, body armor, night vision helmets. There was no panic in their movements. They weren't criminals. They were professionals. Victor smiled as though we were old friends. I'll ask only once. He nodded toward the 20 blue journals. Hand them over. I'll leave peacefully. I looked at him for several seconds, then asked quietly, Did you kill your own brother? The smile disappeared from his face. His men shifted uneasily. Daniel stared at Victor. He had been waiting 25 years to hear the answer. Victor sighed. I wondered how long it would take before someone asked that. He slowly removed his gloves. I didn't kill David. You expect us to believe that? Margaret Collins asked. Victor looked directly at her. No. I expect you to prove otherwise. He walked closer, until only a few feet separated us. My brother and I fought. Constantly. We argued about money, about control, about the future. He smiled sadly. But despite everything, I loved him. Daniel clenched his fists. You let everyone think I died. Victor looked at him. I was told you had. I searched for years. I even hired investigators. But Edward Carter hid you too well. Eleanor quietly nodded. Edward kept his promise. I studied Victor carefully. For the first time, he didn't look like a villain. He looked tired, like a man carrying decades of regret. Then why are you here? I asked. Victor answered honestly. Because Harold betrayed me. Silence. He reached into his coat and removed a folded contract. This. He handed it to me. I unfolded the pages. At the bottom, Harold Benson's signature. The agreement transferred every remaining Ryland asset into shell companies controlled by Harold. Date signed. 2 weeks ago. Victor laughed bitterly. I spent 30 years believing Harold was helping me recover my family's legacy. He was stealing it, one company at a time. Daniel stepped forward. So all this was for nothing? Victor slowly shook his head. No. I came for the journals because I believed they contained the legal codes needed to reclaim everything. I smiled faintly. They don't. He frowned. What? They contain knowledge, not ownership. They won't make you rich. They'll only teach you how to become rich. Victor stared at me, searching my face for a lie. He found none. Lauren suddenly spoke. If that's true, then why did Harold want them so badly? Everyone became silent. Then, Daniel answered. Because Harold already has the money. He wants the only thing money can't buy. Wisdom. Victor slowly lowered his weapon. For the first time, his bodyguards looked uncertain. They looked at him, waiting for orders. Instead, Victor laughed. A genuine laugh. I spent 30 years chasing a treasure. That couldn't be stolen. He looked toward the journals, then back at me. Edward Carter defeated me. Before I even started. At that exact moment, the emergency generator shut down. Every light inside the vault went dark. Complete darkness. Then, a familiar voice echoed through hidden speakers. Calm. Smooth. Amused. Harold Benson. Congratulations. You've finally solved the puzzle. The room froze. The voice continued. Richard believed power was money. Victor believed power was inheritance. David believed power was honesty. A pause. Then, Edward believed power was wisdom. Another pause. Then Harold laughed. All of them were wrong. The walls suddenly vibrated. Margaret looked around frantically. What's happening? Daniel's face turned pale. The building. It's shaking. A hidden projector came to life. Harold appeared on a giant white screen. He was sitting inside a luxurious office. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a city skyline. He smiled politely. I should thank all of you. He looked directly into the camera. Evelyn, you found every secret I couldn't. My heart sank. What are you talking about? Harold leaned back. For 30 years, I searched for Edward's hidden archive. I found copies, false trails, empty vaults, but never the real one. He smiled wider. Until today, Daniel suddenly understood. No. Harold nodded. You led me straight to it. Victor looked horrified. You tracked us. Harold raised a small device. The camera inside Edward's pocket watch. We destroyed it. Harold chuckled. After it had already transmitted everything. Every hidden passage. Every lock. Every code. Every journal. Everything. He had seen it all. Then Harold said something that chilled the room. I don't need the journals anymore. I frowned. What? He smiled. Because while you were busy protecting the library, he pressed a button on his desk. A live security feed appeared. It wasn't the mansion. It wasn't the vault. It was the Carter Trust headquarters in Manhattan. Employees were being escorted out. Computers seized. Servers disconnected. Men in suits carrying boxes of legal files. Harold calmly folded his hands. I've already taken the trust. Daniel whispered. Impossible. Harold shook his head. No. Perfectly legal. He held up one final document. At the bottom, a signature. My signature. I stared at it in disbelief. I never signed that. Harold smiled. I know. But someone who looked exactly like you did. The screen went black. Silence filled the vault. Margaret whispered. If that filing has already been processed, the Carter Trust could legally appear to have changed control. I slowly closed my eyes. The battle we'd been fighting had only been the distraction. Harold hadn't wanted the journals. He wanted us looking in the wrong direction. And now, the greatest legal theft in American business history had already begun. No one moved. No one spoke. Harold's final sentence echoed through the vault. Someone who looked exactly like you did. I stared at the blank screen. My signature. My identity. My trust. Someone had stolen all three. Margaret Collins immediately pulled out her secure phone. I need Washington. Within seconds, she was connected. This is Director Collins. I need emergency confirmation on every filing submitted under the Carter Family Trust during the last 72 hours. She listened. Then her face turned pale. They've already registered it? Silence. No. Don't approve anything else. She ended the call. Daniel stepped toward her. What happened? Margaret looked at me. They've already processed a transfer request. My heart sank. Processed. She nodded. Not finalized, but processed. Lauren whispered. How is that even possible? Margaret answered quietly. The documents passed every security check. Fingerprint. Facial recognition. Voice authentication. Everything matched. Everything. Except, it wasn't me. Eleanor slowly sat down. There was only one way. What? They built a perfect copy. Daniel frowned. A double. Margaret nodded. Not a twin. An impersonator. I closed my eyes. Then, a memory surfaced. 3 months earlier, Michael had insisted I attend a company promotional video. I hated cameras, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. We're modernizing the company. He'd smiled. They need your face for internal security. 4 hours. Cameras recorded me from every angle. Smiling, talking, walking, reading documents aloud. At the time, I thought it was a marketing campaign. Now, I realized something horrifying. They weren't filming advertisements. They were collecting biometric data. Daniel whispered. It wasn't about publicity. Lauren finished the sentence. It was about building another Evelyn. Margaret looked toward me. Do you remember anyone unusual at that shoot? I thought carefully. Then, one face appeared in my mind. A young makeup artist. Quiet. Friendly. She kept studying my face. Taking measurements. Adjusting tiny details that didn't need adjusting. I had even joked. You know my face better than I do. She had smiled. And replied. That's my job. My heart began pounding. It was never makeup. Daniel looked at me. It was mapping. Margaret immediately opened her tablet. Description. I gave everything I could remember. Height. Hair. Eyes. Accent. The way she smiled. The tiny scar near her left eyebrow. Margaret typed rapidly. Then, her tablet beeped. One result. A government facial recognition match. A passport photo appeared. I had never seen the woman before. Name. Sofia Varga. Nationality. Hungarian. Occupation. Professional identity consultant. Daniel frowned. What does that even mean? Margaret answered grimly. It means she doesn't steal money. She steals people. Another file appeared. International investigations. Financial fraud. Corporate espionage. Political impersonation. Witness replacement. Everywhere Sofia Varga appeared. Someone lost everything. Without realizing it. Until it was too late. Lauren whispered. So Harold hired her. Margaret slowly shook her head. No. He didn't hire her. He partnered with her. At that moment, the vault telephone rang again. No one wanted to answer it. It rang a second time. A third. Finally, I picked it up. A woman's voice greeted me. Calm. Elegant. With a faint European accent. Hello, Evelyn. I didn't speak. She smiled through the silence. You've been looking for me. My pulse quickened. Sophia. She laughed softly. Very good. What do you want? I wanted to congratulate you. For what? Most people never realize they've already been replaced. I gripped the receiver tighter. You forged my identity. No. She corrected gently. I became your identity. Daniel stepped closer, trying to hear. I pressed the speaker button. Her voice filled the vault. Do you know how difficult it is to become someone else? She sounded almost proud. I studied your handwriting. Your breathing. Your smile. Your favorite perfume. The way you paused before signing your name. Lauren looked horrified. Sophia continued. By the end, even your husband couldn't tell the difference. Every eye turned toward Michael's role in all of this, even though he wasn't there. Had he really failed to notice? Or had he simply not cared? I asked quietly, "Why are you telling me this?" She laughed again. "Because I'm retiring." What? This was my final assignment. No one will ever find me. Then she said something unexpected. "Besides, you should stop chasing me." Why? Her voice suddenly became serious. "Because Harold Benson is about to betray me too." The line went dead. The vault was silent once more. Daniel broke the silence. "He betrays everyone." Margaret nodded. "That's his pattern." Lauren looked toward me. "So what do we do now?" I looked at the 20 blue journals, then at my grandfather's letter, then at the destroyed pocket watch lying on the floor. Finally, I smiled. For the first time in days. Not because I had one. Because I had finally understood my grandfather's greatest lesson. Harold Benson believed every problem could be solved by controlling documents, by controlling identities, by controlling signatures. He thought ownership existed on paper. My grandfather had believed something completely different. Real ownership was trust. And Harold had just destroyed the one thing he could never forge: his own credibility. Just then, Margaret's secure phone rang again. She answered, listened for only 5 seconds, then looked directly at me. "Evelyn, what is it?" She smiled. "A judge just froze every transfer made under the Carter Trust." "Why?" Margaret slowly lowered the phone. "Because someone walked into federal court this morning and proved that there were 2 Evelyn Carters." The words echoed in my mind. There are 2 Evelyn Carters. No one spoke. Lauren blinked twice. Daniel looked completely stunned. Margaret Collins grabbed her coat. "We're leaving. Now." 3 hours later. Federal Courthouse, New York. The building was surrounded by reporters. Police barricades. Satellite news vans. No one knew exactly what was happening. Only one headline had leaked. "Carter Trust under fraud investigation." As we stepped out of the vehicle, hundreds of cameras turned toward us. "Evelyn, did you steal the trust? Is the Carter empire collapsing? Are the fraud allegations true?" Security quickly escorted us inside. Courtroom 7. Packed. Lawyers, federal agents, journalists, corporate executives. Even Richard Ashford had been brought from custody to testify. For the first time, I saw him looking genuinely frightened. Not because of prison. Because of Harold Benson. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered. "Be seated." The room fell silent. "The purpose of today's emergency hearing is to determine the lawful trustee of the Carter Family Trust." She looked around the courtroom. "Bring in the second claimant." The side doors opened. Footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Every person in the courtroom turned. And then I saw her. Myself. She wore my style. My hairstyle. My glasses. Even my grandfather's necklace. She smiled exactly the way I smiled during business meetings. The resemblance was terrifying. Gasps filled the courtroom. Lauren whispered, "My God." Daniel couldn't speak. Richard Ashford simply stared. Even he couldn't tell us apart. The woman walked confidently to the witness stand. She looked directly at me, then smiled. St. respectfully. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." Her voice matched mine almost perfectly. Judge Whitmore frowned. "For the record." "State your name." She answered without hesitation. "Evelyn Grace Carter." Then the judge looked at me. "And you?" "Evelyn Grace Carter." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Harold Benson slowly stood from the defense table. Perfect suit. Perfect smile. Perfect confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, I understand this appears unusual, but appearances," he glanced at me, "can be deceiving." He presented passports, birth certificates, biometric reports, DNA records, voice analyses. Everything identified Sophia as Evelyn Carter. Every official database agreed. Margaret Collins whispered, "Impossible." Harold smiled. "It isn't impossible. It is preparation." He turned toward the judge. My client has acted as trustee for months. Every signature has been verified. Every security protocol passed. The opposing claimant. He looked directly at me. Has no legal proof she is who she claims to be. The room exploded with murmurs. For one terrifying moment. It looked as though Harold had won. Then, Judge Whitmore looked toward me. Ms. Carter, do you wish to respond? I slowly stood. My hands were steady. My heartbeat wasn't. No, Your Honor. Harold smiled. He thought I'd surrendered. Then I continued. I'd like to call my first witness. Who? I smiled. Edward Carter. Harold laughed. The man's been dead for years. I know. But his testimony isn't. Lauren wheeled a small steel case into the courtroom. Harold frowned. What is that? I opened it carefully. Inside was an old film projector. The very one my grandfather had hidden decades ago. Daniel looked at me in surprise. You found another copy? I nodded. There was one final recording. The courtroom lights dimmed. The projector flickered to life. Edward Carter appeared on the screen. Older, weaker, but smiling. He looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, Harold Benson has finally revealed himself. Harold's smile vanished instantly. Edward continued. Harold is brilliant, patient, dangerous, which is why I never trusted any document he could touch. He held up a leather journal. Identity isn't paper. Identity is memory. Then he looked directly into the camera. Almost as if he were speaking to me. Evelyn, only you know the answer. The video stopped. The courtroom became silent. Judge Whitmore frowned. What answer? I looked toward Sophia, then smiled gently. You've copied my face, my handwriting, my voice, my fingerprints. You even copied my habits. She smiled confidently. I did. But I took one slow step forward. You couldn't copy my childhood. The courtroom fell silent. I looked directly into Sophia's eyes. When I was 7 years old, my grandfather gave me something. He told me never to tell another living soul. I paused. If you're really Evelyn Carter, you tell this court what it was. Sophia's confidence disappeared. For the first time, she hesitated. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Harold slowly stood. Objection. I interrupted. No. If she's Evelyn Carter, she'll know. The judge nodded. Answer the question. Sophia remained silent. Then, I smiled, reached into my coat pocket, and placed a tiny object on the judge's bench. A faded brass coin, worn smooth with age. Edward Carter's lucky coin. My grandfather gave me this after I survived nearly drowning at Lake Ashford. No one else was there. No records. No witnesses. Only him. And me. I looked at Sophia. You memorized my life. But you couldn't memorize a memory that existed only in our hearts. The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Whitmore struck the gavel repeatedly. Order! Order! Harold Benson's face had gone completely pale. For the first time, the man who always had an answer had none. Then, the courtroom doors burst open. A federal marshal rushed inside. Your Honor, what is it? He handed the judge a sealed warrant. She read it silently, then looked straight at Harold Benson. Her voice was calm, but absolute. Mr. Benson, you are under federal indictment on 12 counts of fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, obstruction of justice, and racketeering. Harold didn't run. He didn't argue. He simply smiled. A slow, confident smile. Then he whispered something so quietly. Only I heard it. You finally beat me, Evelyn. But you still haven't found the last secret. He allowed the marshals to place him in handcuffs. As they led him away, he never looked back, only smiled, as if he still believed the game wasn't over. The courtroom doors closed behind Harold Benson. The sound of the lock echoed through the silent chamber. For the first time in 30 years, the man who had manipulated billionaires, judges, politicians, and entire corporations was wearing handcuffs. Reporters rushed outside. Television anchors declared the case over. The headlines had already begun. The Carter Trust saved. Master fraudster arrested. Harold Benson's empire falls. Everyone believed the story was finished. Everyone. Except me. As the marshals escorted Harold toward the elevator, he turned his head just enough to meet my eyes. He smiled. Not the smile of a defeated man. The smile of someone who had already made his next move. Then he disappeared. Daniel walked beside me. We won. I didn't answer. Laura noticed immediately. What is it? I looked toward the empty witness stand. He wasn't afraid. Margaret Collins frowned. Of prison? I nodded. Harold spent 30 years planning every move. He wouldn't gamble everything on one trial. So, what are we missing? An hour later, we gathered inside Edward Carter's private office. The blue journals rested safely on the table. The atmosphere should have felt victorious. Instead, it felt unfinished. Eleanor quietly poured tea. Then she spoke. Edward once told me something. Daniel looked up. What? He said. The most dangerous man isn't the one who steals your fortune. It's the one who convinces you the story is over. Suddenly, Margaret Collins' secure phone vibrated. She answered. Her expression changed instantly. What? She listened for several seconds. No. That's impossible. She slowly lowered the phone. What happened? I asked. She looked directly at me. Harold Benson never arrived at federal prison. Silence. Daniel stood abruptly. What do you mean? The prison transport convoy was intercepted. Lauren gasped. He escaped. Margaret shook her head. We don't know. The convoy was found abandoned. No guards. No prisoners. No vehicles. It was as if they simply vanished. Before anyone could respond, a courier entered the office. Package for Evelyn Carter. I didn't order anything. There was no return address. He placed a small wooden box on the desk, then left. The room fell silent. Daniel examined it carefully. No explosives. Margaret nodded. It's clean. I slowly opened the lid. Inside was Harold Benson's wristwatch, the one he had been wearing in court. Underneath it, a folded note. Only one sentence. Tick, tock. Lauren whispered. What does that mean? Before anyone answered, the watch suddenly began to beep. Beep, beep, beep. Daniel's eyes widened. Everyone back. He grabbed the box and threw it across the room. The watch hit the wall. Instead of exploding, its back cover popped open. A tiny flash drive slid onto the floor. Margaret carefully picked it up. No bomb. Just this. I plugged it into a secure laptop. A single video file appeared. Final_message.mp4. I pressed play. Harold appeared on the screen. Calm as ever. He smiled. If you're watching this, then I expected to lose. Daniel frowned. He planned his own arrest. Harold continued. You've taken my companies, my accounts, my influence. Very impressive. He leaned closer to the camera. But you've forgotten something. I've never cared about money. He held up a photograph. It showed a little girl, about 6 years old, standing beside Edward Carter. I stared at the screen. I've never seen her before. Neither had Daniel, nor Eleanor. Harold smiled. You've spent weeks trying to understand Edward Carter. But there is one person he protected even more than Evelyn. The room became completely silent. Harold placed the photograph on his desk, then said the war. DS that made my heart stop. Edward Carter had another granddaughter. I stared at the screen. No. Harold nodded slowly. She disappeared 26 years ago. Everyone believed she died. They were wrong. Daniel whispered. Another heir. Harold smiled one last time. And before you ask. No. It isn't Sophia. He stood up, straightened his jacket, then spoke softly. Find her before they do. The video ended. Silence. No one moved. No one breathed. I looked again at the old photograph. The little girl had the same eyes as my grandfather. The same smile. The same Carter family features. Yet, I had never heard her name. Eleanor slowly reached for the photograph. Her hands began trembling. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "I thought she was gone." I turned to her. "You know who she is?" Eleanor closed her eyes. After 26 years, she finally spoke the name she had sworn never to reveal. Her name was Amelia Carter. The room fell silent, because we all understood the truth. Harold Benson hadn't left us one final threat. He had left us one final hunt. The name echoed through the room. Amelia Carter. No one spoke. Even the air felt heavy. I looked at Eleanor. Who was Amelia? A tear rolled down her cheek. For 26 years. I promised Edward I'd never say her name. Daniel leaned forward. Why? Eleanor slowly picked up the old photograph. Her fingers trembled. Because if anyone discovered she was alive, they would never stop hunting her. I looked closely at the picture. A little girl. Curly brown hair. Bright green eyes. No older than 6. She was laughing while sitting on my grandfather's shoulders. I've never seen this photograph. Eleanor smiled sadly. Edward made sure you never would. Lauren frowned. If Amelia was another granddaughter, why didn't Evelyn know she existed? Eleanor closed her eyes. Because Edward erased her. Silence filled the room. What do you mean? Erased her? Eleanor walked toward the fireplace. She stared into the fading flames. 26 years ago, the Carter family wasn't just wealthy. They were at war. Daniel whispered. With Victor. She nodded. And others. People who wanted the Carter legacy. She took a deep breath. One night, someone broke into the Carter estate. They weren't there to steal money. They wanted the children. My heart stopped. The children? Eleanor nodded. You. And Amelia. I couldn't breathe. I was there. You were 4 years old. Amelia was 6. What happened? Eleanor looked down. Edward split you apart. He took you. I took Amelia. We escaped through different tunnels beneath the estate. Daniel whispered. So that's why no one found both girls. Eleanor nodded. We reached the river. But we were being followed. She closed her eyes tightly. I heard gunshots. I hid Amelia beneath an old wooden bridge. When I came back, she was gone. Lauren covered her mouth. You never found her? No. I searched for months. So did Edward. But it was as if she vanished. Margaret Collins slowly opened a federal archive on her tablet. Wait. She began searching. Missing children. 26 years ago. Nothing. No Amelia Carter. No unidentified child. No adoption. No death certificate. Nothing. Margaret looked up. Someone erased every record. Daniel whispered. Harold. I picked up the photograph again. Then something caught my eye. On Amelia's wrist. A tiny silver bracelet. Engraved with one word. Hope. I froze. Hope. Eleanor looked at the bracelet. Then suddenly gasped. I remember. What? Edward had 2 bracelets made. She reached into her purse. Slowly. Carefully. From an old velvet pouch. She removed another bracelet. Mine. I had worn it as a child before it disappeared years ago. Mine read. Faith. Amelia's read. Hope. Edward had given each granddaughter one. Daniel smiled softly. So if we find Hope, we find Amelia. Before anyone could respond, Margaret's tablet beeped. An automatic facial recognition alert. The old photograph had matched a modern image. Everyone stared at the screen. Probability. 97.8%. Current name. Dr. Emily Hayes. Occupation. Professor of Economic History. Location. Oxford, England. Age. Lauren whispered. Emily Hayes. Eleanor nearly dropped the tablet. No. That's impossible. Margaret looked confused. Why? Eleanor's voice cracked. Because Hayes was my maiden name. Silence. Daniel slowly turned toward Eleanor. You never told anyone your real surname. She shook her head. I didn't. Then how? How had Amelia ended up carrying Eleanor's family name? Had someone protected her? Or had someone been watching Eleanor all along? Before anyone could answer, a new email appeared on the laptop. Send. Unknown. Subject. You found her. Inside. Only one sentence. Don't let Harold reach her first. Attached beneath it. A boarding pass. First class. New York to London. Departure. Tomorrow morning. I looked around the room. 26 years of questions were about to lead us across the ocean. And somewhere in England, a woman named Dr. Emily Hayes had no idea that she might be the last missing heir to the Carter legacy. The private jet lifted into the clouds. New York disappeared beneath us. No one spoke. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was filled with one question. What if Dr. Emily Hayes really was Amelia Carter? Daniel stared out the window. If she's alive, then everything changes. Lauren frowned. What do you mean? Daniel turned toward us. The Carter Trust wasn't designed for one heir. It was designed for two. Eleanor quietly nodded. Edward always believed both girls would come home. She reached into her handbag. For the first time in decades, she removed a small velvet pouch. Inside, a tiny silver key. Around it hung a faded tag. In Edward's handwriting. For Amelia. When she's ready. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. I've carried this every day for 26 years. I promised I'd return it. Oxford, England. The next morning, rain covered the ancient stone streets. Oxford looked untouched by time. Students hurried between centuries-old buildings. None of them knew that history was about to walk through their campus. Margaret checked the address. Street Edmund Hall. Office 214. We walked quietly through the corridor. Nameplates lined the walls. Then, we saw it. Dr. Emily Hayes, professor of economic history. Daniel stopped walking. His breathing became heavier. She's here. The office door was open. Inside, a woman stood beside a bookshelf. She looked about 32. Simple navy suit. Reading glasses. Hair tied back. She looked nothing like a billionaire. Nothing like someone hiding a fortune. She looked happy. Peaceful. She smiled politely as we entered. Good morning. Can I help you? The moment Eleanor saw her, she froze. Her hands began shaking uncontrollably. A single whisper escaped her lips. Amelia. The woman looked confused. I'm sorry. My name is Emily. I looked into her eyes. Green. Exactly like the little girl in the photograph. Daniel looked at me. He saw it too. Emily smiled awkwardly. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. Eleanor slowly stepped forward. No, I never could. Emily became uncomfortable. I really think. Then, Eleanor removed the silver key from her purse. Emily's smile vanished. She stared at it. Her face slowly lost all color. Where did you get that? Eleanor's voice cracked. Because it belongs to you. Emily took one step backward. No. Her breathing became uneven. I've seen that key before. Everyone became silent. You have. She nodded slowly. In dreams. She looked frightened now. As long as I can remember, I've dreamed about an old house, a grandfather, a fireplace, and... She stopped speaking. And what? Emily closed her eyes. A little girl crying because she'd lost her bracelet. I instinctively touched the silver bracelet on my wrist. The one engraved. Faith. Emily stared at it. Her hands began trembling. Without thinking, she whispered one word. Hope. She slowly lifted her sleeve. Around her wrist, hidden beneath her watch, was an old silver bracelet, worn by time, engraved with one word. Hope. Eleanor broke down in tears. Daniel couldn't speak. Lauren covered her mouth. After 26 years, the two bracelets were finally together again. Emily looked at all of us. What is happening? I stepped forward slowly. My name is Evelyn Carter. She smiled politely. I know. I've read your articles. No. I whispered. I'm your cousin. Silence. Then, Eleanor gently corrected me. No, Evelyn. I turned toward her. Eleanor smiled through tears. You've both been told the wrong story. She looked at Emily, then at me. Finally, she whispered the truth she had carried for decades. You're not cousins. You're sisters. The room spun. I couldn't breathe. No. Eleanor nodded. Edward lied. To everyone. He had to. Emily shook her head in disbelief. This isn't possible. Eleanor's tears fell freely. Your parents died protecting both of you. Edward raised Evelyn publicly. But he hid you. Because he believed separating you was the only way to keep you alive. Emily sank into her chair. Everything she had believed about her life began falling apart. At that exact moment, a knock echoed through the office door. 3 slow knocks. Everyone turned. A delivery man stood outside. Package for Dr. Emily Hayes. She frowned. I wasn't expecting anything. He handed her a small black envelope. No return address. Only one sentence written across the front. It's time you remembered. Emily carefully opened it. Inside was an old photograph, taken 26 years earlier. 2 little girls, holding hands, standing beside Edward Carter. One wore a bracelet engraved faith. The other wore hope. On the back, someone had written in neat handwriting. Some families are separated by fear. The strongest ones find each other anyway. Before anyone could speak, Emily's phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice spoke. Calm, cold, unmistakable. Harold Benson. Welcome home, Amelia. The line went silent. Emily slowly lowered the phone. Her hands were shaking. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. And for the first time, she didn't call herself Emily. She whispered, My name is Amelia. Isn't it? The room was silent. Emily. No. Amelia slowly lowered the phone. Her hands trembled. Tears filled her eyes. She looked at me, then whispered, He's been calling me that. 4 years. Everyone froze. I stepped closer. What do you mean? Amelia closed her eyes. I always thought it was a prank. He would call once every few months. He never asked for money. He never threatened me. He only asked one question. She swallowed. Do you remember who you are? Daniel looked stunned. Harold knew. Eleanor nodded sadly. He always knew. Lauren frowned. If he knew where Amelia was, why didn't he take her? Eleanor slowly smiled. Because he couldn't. Everyone looked at her. She pointed toward the bracelet on Amelia's wrist. Edward's last protection. Lauren looked confused. A brack. A let. No. Eleanor replied. A promise. She explained quietly. When Amelia was hidden, Edward placed her with one of the only families he trusted. The Hayes family. They never told her who she really was. They raised her as their own daughter. They changed countries. Changed identities. Changed everything. Daniel whispered. And Harold could never prove it. Eleanor nodded. He knew she existed. But he never knew if she remembered. Amelia slowly sat down. I don't remember much. Just pieces. A big house. A warm fireplace. A man who smelled like old books. I smiled through tears. Grandpa. She nodded. I think so. Then she looked at me. I also remember holding someone's hand. She stared at my bracelet. Your hand. For a moment. Neither of us spoke. 26 years. Separated by lies. Yet somehow, a child's memory had survived. Suddenly, Margaret Collins' secure phone rang. She answered immediately. Her expression hardened. Understood. She ended the call. What happened? I asked. She took a deep breath. We found Harold. Everyone stood at once. Where? She shook her head. That's the problem. He wants to be found. She placed a tablet on the table. A live video feed appeared. Harold Benson. Sitting alone inside a grand library. No guards. No weapons. No fear. Behind him, thousands of books lined the walls. He calmly poured himself a cup of tea, then looked directly into the camera, as if he knew we were watching. He smiled. Congratulations. You found Amelia. Amelia instinctively stepped back. Harold continued. I wondered how long it would take. Daniel shouted at the screen. What do you want? Harold ignored him. Instead, he looked only at Amelia. You've spent your life believing you were ordinary. He smiled gently. You aren't. Amelia whispered. Leave me alone. Harold shook his head. I've been protecting you. The room erupted. Daniel slammed his fist onto the desk. Protecting. Harold remained calm. Yes. He folded his hands. Victor wanted to use you. Richard wanted to erase you. Sophia wanted to replace Evelyn. I stopped all three. No one believed him. Yet, his voice carried absolute certainty. I stepped toward the screen. Why? Harold looked directly at me. Because your grandfather made me a promise. Silence. What promise? Harold smiled sadly. He asked me to keep one granddaughter alive. The room froze. Eleanor whispered. No. Harold nodded. I failed him once. I refused to fail him twice. Daniel looked furious. You're lying. Harold didn't argue. Instead, he opened an old leather folder. Inside was a signed letter. Edward Carter's signature. Harold placed it before the camera. I expected you wouldn't believe me. He slowly read the first line. Harold, if I die before this war ends, protect the child they don't know exists. My heart stopped. The handwriting was my grandfather's. Lauren whispered. This changes everything. Did it? Or was Harold manipulating us one final time? I couldn't tell. Harold leaned closer. You've all spent months trying to decide whether I'm a monster. He smiled faintly. I am. But monsters sometimes keep worse monsters away. Then, his expression changed. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. He stood abruptly. They found me. Static filled the screen. Gunfire echoed in the background. Someone shouted. The library doors burst open. Masked men stormed inside. Harold looked into the camera one last time. Not at me. Not at Daniel. At Amelia. He shouted. Run. The transmission cut to black. Silence. No one moved. Then Margaret's tablet flashed one final location before the signal disappeared. Blackwood Manor. Scottish Highlands. Daniel looked at me. If Harold is telling the truth, someone else has been pulling the strings all along. I stared at the dark screen. For the first time, I wasn't chasing Harold Benson. I was racing to save him. Because if he died, the last answers would die with him. The helicopter cut through the storm. Rain slammed against the windows. Lightning flashed across the Scottish Highlands. No one spoke. Margaret Collins kept her eyes fixed on the GPS. Blackwood Manor. Distance. 3 minutes. Daniel broke the silence. What if this is another trap? No one answered. Because we all knew. It probably was. The helicopter landed in a field surrounded by ancient pine trees. In the distance, an enormous stone mansion stood on the edge of a cliff, half hidden by fog. Blackwood Manor. It looked abandoned. Yet every window glowed with warm light. As if someone had been waiting for us. Federal agents surrounded the estate. Not one body. Not one vehicle. Not one sign of the gunfight we'd seen on Harold's video. Margaret frowned. This doesn't make sense. It happened less than an hour ago. Daniel whispered. Someone cleaned everything. We entered carefully. The massive wooden doors creaked open. The entrance hall was spotless. A fire burned in the fireplace. Fresh tea still steamed on a silver tray. 1 cup. Still warm. Harold had been here. Only minutes earlier. Lauren noticed something. Look. On the marble floor, a chessboard had been arranged. Half the pieces remained. The other half were missing. Beside the board lay a handwritten note. The king never wins alone. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Harold Benson. Daniel picked up the Black King. Something rattled inside. He carefully opened the base. A tiny rolled piece of paper slid out. Only 4 words. Library. Third shelf. We hurried through the manor. The library was enormous. Thousands of old books stretched from floor to ceiling. Exactly like the one from Harold's video. But no Harold. Eleanor counted quietly. 1, 2, 3. She pulled the third bookshelf. It moved. A hidden passage opened behind it. Cold air rushed toward us. Stone stairs disappeared into darkness. At the bottom, we found a circular chamber. Ancient. Older than the manor itself. In the center stood a single wooden table. On it, a leather journal. And Harold Benson's glasses. Daniel rushed forward. Harold. No answer. Only silence. I opened the journal. The first page read, Confession. My hands shook. It wasn't another puzzle. It wasn't another clue. It was Harold's own handwriting. If you are reading this, I have either disappeared, or I am already dead. Lauren slowly sat down. The room suddenly felt colder. I continued reading. Everything you believed about me is true. I committed fraud. I lied. I manipulated governments, courts, and corporations. I destroyed lives. Then, the next sentence. But I never ordered David Ryland's murder. Daniel stared at the page. His hands clenched into fists. The journal continued. There was always someone above me. Silence filled the chamber. Above Harold? Who? Another page. Another name. Not Richard. Not Victor. Not Sophia. Not Amelia. A name none of us had ever heard before. Sebastian Wolf. Margaret frowned. I've never heard of him. Daniel hadn't either. Neither had Eleanor. Yet Harold had written one sentence beneath the name. The only man Edward Carter feared. Just then, a faint voice echoed from somewhere deeper underground. Help. Everyone froze. It came again. Help. It was weak. Barely audible. Daniel grabbed a flashlight. There. We followed the sound through a narrow stone tunnel. At the end, behind iron bars, sat Harold Benson. Alive. His suit torn. His face bruised. One wrist chained to the wall. He looked up as we approached. For the first time since we'd known him. He wasn't smiling. He looked exhausted. Almost relieved. You came. Daniel stared at him in disbelief. Who did this to you? Harold closed his eyes. The man I warned you about. I stepped closer. Sebastian Wolf? Harold slowly nodded. He's real. Where is he? Harold looked toward the darkness beyond the cell. Then whispered. Closer than you think. Before anyone could ask another question, a slow clap echoed through the tunnel. Once. Twice. 3 times. A man's voice emerged from the shadows. Deep. Calm. Confident. After all these years, Edward's family finally found me. A tall figure stepped into the light. Perfectly tailored black coat. Silver hair. Cold gray eyes. He smiled as if greeting old friends. Then looked directly at me. Hello, Evelyn. I've been expecting you. The tunnel fell silent. Because for the first time, the true mastermind had finally revealed himself. The footsteps echoed through the underground chamber. Slow. Deliberate. Confident. The stranger emerged from the darkness as though he owned it. Tall. Impeccably dressed. Silver hair. Piercing gray eyes. He wasn't carrying a weapon. He didn't need one. He carried something far more dangerous. Absolute confidence. He smiled. Hello, Evelyn. I've been expecting you. Daniel stepped in front of me. Who are you? The man tilted his head slightly. Harold already told you. He extended his hand politely. My name is Sebastian Wolf. The chamber fell silent. Margaret Collins immediately raised her service pistol. Federal agent. Don't move. Sebastian glanced at the gun, then smiled. You won't shoot. Margaret narrowed her eyes. Try me. Sebastian calmly replied. If you shoot me, you'll never learn why Edward Carter sacrificed 2 little girls. Margaret hesitated. Just for a second. That was all Sebastian needed. He turned toward Harold, still chained behind the iron bars. So, You finally betrayed me. Harold slowly laughed. No. I finally stopped helping you. Sebastian nodded. I suppose everyone develops a conscience eventually. Daniel grabbed the prison bars. Let him go. Sebastian looked genuinely amused. You still think Harold is the prisoner? He reached into his coat and tossed a small key onto the stone floor. It slid to my feet. No locks. No tricks. You can release him whenever you wish. Everyone stared at the key, confused. I bent down slowly, picked it up, then looked at Harold. Is this another trap? Harold shook his head. No. It's real. I unlocked the chain. The iron cuffs fell away with a loud clang. Harold rubbed his wrists. He didn't run. He didn't attack. He simply stood beside us. For the first time. Not as an enemy, but as a witness. Sebastian smiled. There. Now we're all on the same side. Daniel exploded. There is no world where we're on your side. Sebastian sighed. I expected that reaction. He walked toward the old stone table. On it rested an ancient leather folder. He opened it carefully. Inside were faded newspaper clippings, photographs, letters, birth certificates. One by one, he spread them across the table. Everything begins here. The oldest newspaper was dated 1964. The headline read, Ryland and Carter announce historic partnership. I frowned. My grandfather and David Ryland. Sebastian nodded. They dreamed of building an empire. He placed another photograph beside it. Edward Carter, David Ryland, and a much younger Sebastian Wolf, standing between them. Smiling, Daniel stared in disbelief. You knew my father? Sebastian answered quietly. I knew him better than anyone. Harold spoke for the first time. No. You used him. Sebastian didn't deny it. I did. He looked directly at me. You've spent months asking it. Wrong question. You kept asking. Who betrayed the family? He smiled sadly. The better question is, why was the family betrayed? Lauren folded her arms. Then tell us. Sebastian slowly closed the folder. Because your grandfathers were about to expose something. Worth far more than any corporation. I frowned. The journals? No. The trust? No. The fortune? Again? No. Sebastian looked each of us in the eye, then whispered. They discovered a financial network that had been secretly controlling governments, banks, and multinational companies. For decades. The room became deathly quiet. Daniel frowned. What network? Sebastian answered with a single word. The consortium. Margaret Collins frowned. I've never heard of it. Sebastian smiled. Exactly. That means it still exists. Harold stepped forward. This is where you always lied. Sebastian looked at him. No. This is where you always stopped listening. Harold's face hardened. I spent 30 years believing I was protecting the Carter family from you. Sebastian shook his head. And you were. He paused. But not from me. He pointed upward, toward the world above. From them. Before anyone could respond, a loud metallic click echoed through the chamber. Every exit door slammed shut. Steel barriers dropped from the ceiling. Margaret rushed to the entrance. Locked. Daniel tried another. Locked. Lauren looked up. The ventilation just stopped. The air became eerily still. Sebastian looked genuinely surprised. No. He whispered. They're early. Harold's expression changed instantly. What have you done? I didn't do this. Sebastian looked around the chamber. Then, for the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. Real fear. He whispered only 3 words. They found us. The lights suddenly went out. Complete darkness. A deep mechanical voice echoed through hidden speakers. Containment protocol activated. No survivors. Then, the sound of heavy footsteps began closing in from every direction. Darkness. Complete darkness. No one moved. No one even breathed. The mechanical voice echoed through the underground chamber one final time. Containment protocol activated. No survivors authorized. Then, silence. A soft red emergency light flickered on. Then another. The chamber was now bathed in crimson. Daniel whispered, "Who's controlling this place?" Sebastian Wolf didn't answer immediately. For the first time, the man who always had an answer looked terrified. Finally, he spoke. "The consortium." Margaret Collins gripped her pistol tighter. "You keep saying that. But what is it?" Sebastian slowly looked around the room. "As long as governments have existed. As long as banks have existed. As long as wars have been financed. They have existed." Lauren frowned. "You're saying they're older than corporations?" Sebastian nodded. "They don't own countries. They own the people who lend countries money." Harold Benson laughed bitterly. "I warned Edward not to investigate them." Sebastian looked at him. "And Edward refused." Harold nodded. He said, "If no one fights them, they'll own the future." Suddenly, boom! A steel door exploded inward. Smoke rolled into the chamber. Everyone raised their weapons. But no one fired. Because the people walking through the smoke weren't ordinary soldiers. They wore black suits. No badges. No military insignia. No names. Only a silver emblem on their collars. A circle. Surrounded by 12 stars. The leader stepped forward. His face was expressionless. He looked at Sebastian. Then Harold. Then at me. He smiled politely. "Miss Carter." His voice was calm. Professional. As though we were attending a business meeting. "I apologize for the interruption." Daniel shouted. "Who are you?" The man ignored him. Instead, he reached into his coat. Everyone tensed. He removed a leather business card. He placed it carefully on the stone table. Across the front, only 2 words. The consortium. No name. No address. No phone number. Nothing else. Margaret stepped forward. "You're under arrest." The man smiled. "By whom?" "The Federal Bureau." He looked genuinely curious. "Which one?" Margaret frowned. "The United States." The stranger smiled even wider. "We financed the creation of that bureau." Silence. No one knew how to respond. He calmly folded his hands. "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Adrian Mercer. I represent the board." Daniel whispered. "What board?" Mercer's eyes met his. "The one that has existed long before your companies. And will exist long after them." Harold suddenly shouted. "Don't listen to him." Mercer glanced at Harold. "You disappointed us." Harold laughed. "I stopped fearing you years ago." Mercer nodded. "Which is why you're no longer useful." Without warning, one of Mercer's men raised a suppressed pistol. A single shot echoed. Harold staggered backward. Blood spread across his shoulder. "I caught him before he fell." "Harold." He grimaced. "I'm fine." It missed my heart. Daniel fired instinctively. The bullet struck one of the attackers. But it bounced harmlessly off hidden body armor. Mercer's men didn't even flinch. Mercer sighed. "Violence is inefficient." He looked directly at me. "Evelyn, we're not here to kill you." "Then why are you here?" He smiled. "To recruit you." The chamber went silent. I stared at him. "Recruit me?" He nodded. "You've done something extraordinary. You defeated Richard Ashford. You outplayed Harold Benson. You reunited the Carter heirs. You solved puzzles that defeated the greatest legal mind of his generation." He paused. "The board is imper. Essed." Lauren couldn't believe what she was hearing. "So you destroy lives. And then offer jobs?" Mercer smiled politely. "We offer influence." He looked back at me. "Imagine changing the world. Without elections. Without shareholders. Without governments." Daniel stepped in front of me. "She'll never join you." Mercer looked at Daniel almost sympathetically. "That isn't your decision." He reached into his briefcase, removed a thick folder, and slid it across the table. Inside were photographs. Thousands of them. Every stage of my life. Birth. School. University. Marriage. Board meetings. Vacations. Even moments I'd believed were completely private. Mercer calmly said, "We've watched you since the day you were born. A chill swept through the chamber. Then he removed one final photograph. It showed my grandfather, Edward Carter, standing beside Adrian Mercer, 40 years younger. They were shaking hands. I stared at the image. No. Mercer nodded. Yes. Your grandfather once sat exactly where you're standing. The room froze. Daniel whispered. Edward knew them. Harold slowly closed his eyes. I prayed she'd never see that picture. I looked at Mercer. My grandfather worked for you? Mercer smiled faintly. No. He refused. He paused. And that's why the war began. A heavy silence filled the chamber. Everything we'd uncovered. Richard's betrayal. Victor's obsession. Harold's manipulation. Sophia's deception. Even Sebastian's secrets. Suddenly felt like pieces of a much larger game. Mercer took one final step toward me, then extended his hand. His voice was calm, almost kind. Join us, Evelyn. Or spend the rest of your life fighting a war you cannot win. I looked at his hand, then at Daniel, at Amelia, at Harold, bleeding beside me, at my grandfather's journals. Edward Carter had spent his life refusing men like Adrian Mercer. Now, it was my turn to decide. Adrian Mercer's hand remained extended. The chamber was silent. Not one person moved. Not even the armed men behind him. They weren't waiting for a battle. They were waiting for my answer. I looked at his hand, then at the photograph of my grandfather, Edward Carter, standing beside Adrian Mercer. The picture had been taken 40 years earlier. Two young men, both smiling, both believing they could change the world. Only one of them had walked away. I finally spoke. You knew my grandfather. Mercer nodded. I respected him. Then why destroy his family? Mercer's expression didn't change. I didn't. He destroyed it himself. The words hit me like a slap. Daniel stepped forward angrily. You're lying. Mercer calmly shook his head. No. He pointed toward the blue journals. Read volume 19. Harold suddenly shouted. Don't. Mercer smiled. He already knows. Eleanor rushed to the journals. Her hands trembled as he found volume 19. She opened it. Halfway through, a folded letter slipped onto the floor. It had never been opened. Across the front, Edward Carter had written, If Mercer ever returns, read this first. I unfolded the pages. The handwriting was unmistakable. My grandfather's. My dear Evelyn, if Adrian Mercer is standing before you, then I have failed. I swallowed hard. The room disappeared around me. Only his words remained. Adrian isn't the devil. He isn't a saint either. He is a man who believes the world can only survive if a few powerful people secretly control it. I glanced at Mercer. He remained perfectly still. The letter continued. I believed something different. I believed ordinary people deserve the chance to choose their own future, even if they sometimes choose badly. A tear rolled down my cheek. Adrian once offered me everything. Unlimited wealth, unlimited influence, unlimited protection. All I had to do was surrender my freedom. Mercer quietly lowered his eyes. He wasn't denying a single word. I refused. That refusal began a war that lasted the rest of my life. The final paragraph was addressed only to me. Evelyn, one day, Adrian will offer you exactly what he offered me. Don't ask whether he's telling the truth. He almost always does. Instead, ask yourself one question. I stopped reading. My voice trembled. Daniel whispered. What question? I looked up. Then read the final line aloud. If someone promises to save the world, who will save the world from them? Silence. Absolute silence. Mercer slowly nodded. Edward always did know how to write. He looked directly into my eyes. So, what is your answer? I stepped forward, until only a few feet separated us. I looked at his outstretched hand. Then, I gently pushed it away. My grandfather already answered you. I agree with him. Mercer closed his eyes, almost as if he had expected it. He smiled. Not angrily, not bitterly, almost proudly. I was hoping you'd say that. Everyone stared at him. What? Daniel asked. Mercer looked toward the armed agents behind him, then quietly said, "Stand down." Every weapon was lowered. The chamber fell silent again. Harold frowned. "What are you doing?" Mercer answered softly. "The test is over." "The test?" I asked. Mercer nodded. "For 40 years. I waited to see whether Edward Carter had chosen the right successor." He looked at me. He did. Then, something happened that none of us expected. Mercer reached inside his coat. Slowly, carefully, he removed a black leather folder. Across the cover, silver letters read, "The Consortium Charter." He placed it on the table. "I cannot destroy the consortium, but I can expose it." Daniel stared at him. "Why would you?" Mercer's calm expression faded for the first time. "Because somewhere along the way, we stopped protecting civilization and started protecting ourselves." He looked around the room. "I've spent decades convincing myself that was the same thing. It wasn't." He slid the folder toward me. "Inside are the names, the accounts, the governments, the companies, everything." Harold looked stunned. "Adrian, you'll be signing your own death warrant." Mercer gave a faint smile. "I signed it years ago, before anyone could speak." A distant explosion shook the tunnel. Then another. The ceiling cracked. Dust poured down. One of Mercer's men rushed forward. "Sir, they've arrived." Mercer's expression changed instantly. "They moved faster than expected." Daniel frowned. "Who?" Mercer looked toward the darkness beyond the chamber, then said the words that made every person there fall silent. "The real board." He took one step back. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I was never the man at the top." Another explosion echoed underground. The lights flickered. The steel doors began to bend inward, as though something immensely powerful was forcing its way inside. Mercer looked at me one last time, then said calmly, "Now the real war begins." The walls trembled. Stone cracked beneath our feet. Dust filled the underground chamber. Another explosion echoed through Blackwood Manor. This one, closer than the last. Mercer's security team rushed to defensive positions. Their calm professionalism had vanished. One of them shouted, "They're through the first gate." Mercer looked toward the tunnel entrance. "No, they're already inside." Daniel frowned. "I thought you said you represented the board." Mercer smiled bitterly. "I represent a board." He paused. "The Executive Council. But above us, there are 12 people." He slowly looked upward. "The founders." Harold closed his eyes. "I told you never to say their names." Mercer replied quietly, "They already know." Suddenly, the lights died again. A deep voice echoed through hidden speakers. Not mechanical. Human. Cold. Emotionless. "Adrian Mercer, your authority has been revoked." Mercer didn't answer. He simply stood straighter. The voice continued. "Harold Benson, your service is terminated." Then, a pause. Long enough to make every heartbeat sound deafening. Finally, the voice spoke my name. "Evelyn Carter, your grandfather should never have chosen you." A chill ran through my body. The steel doors exploded inward. Smoke rolled into the chamber. From it emerged 12 figures. Not soldiers. Not politicians. Not executives. Men and women of different ages. Different nationalities. All dressed in identical black coats. No medals. No ranks. Only a small silver pin. A circle with 12 stars. None of them carried visible weapons. Yet, every armed guard in the room instinctively lowered theirs. The W. Oman at the center stepped forward. She appeared to be in her 70s. Silver hair. Sharp blue eyes. Her posture was flawless. She looked directly at Mercer. "You disappointed us." Mercer nodded. "I know. You chose sentiment over duty." "I did." Without another word, she turned to me. "So, this is Edward Carter's successor." I didn't answer. She smiled faintly. "You look far less dangerous than your grandfather." Harold laughed weakly despite his wound. "That's exactly what everyone said about Edward." right before he destroyed their plans. For the first time, a flicker of irritation crossed the woman's face. She folded her hands. My name is Helena Roth. I chair the founders. Daniel stepped forward. So you're the real leader? Helena shook her head. No. There are no leaders. Only custodians. She looked at the blue journals. So, Edward's library survived. I placed my hand on the journals. It isn't yours. She smiled. No. It never was. Then she surprised everyone. We've never wanted the journals. The room fell silent. Mercer looked genuinely confused. What? Helena nodded. We already know everything inside them. Harold whispered. Impossible. Helena looked at him. Edward wasn't the only person who kept journals. She opened a slim leather case. Inside were 12 journals, nearly identical to my grandfather's, each marked with a different crest. My predecessors documented every negotiation, every vow, every financial collapse. For nearly 3 centuries, I stared at the collection. The Carter journals weren't unique. They were one part of a much larger history. Helena looked at me with quiet curiosity. Do you know why Edward refused us? No. Because he believed knowledge should belong to everyone. She paused. And we believe knowledge in the wrong hands destroys civilizations. Neither argument sounded entirely unreasonable. That realization unsettled me more than anything else. Then Helena asked, what do you intend to do with Edward's legacy? I answered honestly, I don't know yet. She smiled. Good. The most dangerous people are the ones who think they already have every answer. Before anyone could respond, the manor shook again. This time, far more violently. The ceiling cracked open. Stone crashed onto the chamber floor. One of Helena's companions looked up sharply. Chairwoman, that's not us. Helena's calm expression vanished. For the first time, she looked genuinely alarmed. Who breached the outer perimeter? A voice crackled through her earpiece. Her face went pale. No, she whispered. That isn't possible. Mercer immediately noticed. What happened? Helena slowly looked toward him. Her voice, barely audible. Someone has attacked the consortium. Silence. Daniel frowned. Who would attack the most powerful organization? And in the world? Helena answered with a single sentence. One that changed everything. The people we thought no longer existed. At that exact moment, the emergency doors burst open. A wounded guard stumbled inside. They're here. Who? The guard struggled to breathe, then whispered 2 words before collapsing. The keepers. Every member of the founders stood frozen. Even Helena Roth. Even Adrian Mercer. Even Harold Benson. Because whatever the keepers were, they frightened the people who had never feared anyone. The chamber had fallen into complete silence. No one spoke. Not even Helena Roth. The woman who had faced presidents, billionaires, and wars without fear, was staring at the unconscious guard on the floor. His final words echoed through the underground vault. The keepers. Daniel looked around in confusion. Who are they? Harold Benson didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly removed his glasses, closed his eyes, and whispered. I prayed I would die before hearing that name again. I looked at him. You know them? Harold nodded. Very few people do. And those who do rarely live long enough to tell the story. Helena Roth stepped forward. For the first time, her voice carried urgency. We must leave. Mercer frowned. You. The woman who said the consortium fears no one? Helena looked directly at him. We don't. She paused. We fear what they protect. Before anyone could ask another question, the emergency lights suddenly changed. The red glow vanished. Instead, a soft white light illuminated the chamber. No alarms. No explosions. Only silence. Then, footsteps. One pair. Slow. Measured. Calm. Unlike every enemy we had faced, these footsteps carried no anger. No rush. Only certainty. A single figure appeared at the entrance. An elderly man, perhaps 80 years old, Simple gray coat. Wooden walking stick. White beard. No guards. No armor. No weapons. He looked more like a retired schoolteacher than someone capable of frightening the consortium. He smiled kindly. Good evening. No one moved. Even Helena lowered her eyes slightly. A gesture of respect. Or fear. The old man looked around the chamber. His gaze rested briefly on Mercer. Then Harold. Then Daniel. Finally, he looked at me. His smile grew warmer. So, Edward chose well. I frowned. You knew my grandfather? The old man chuckled softly. My dear. I taught him. The room froze. Daniel whispered. What? The old man nodded. Edward Carter was my student. So was David Ryland. He looked toward Helena. So was Adrian Mercer. Then, he looked at Harold. And yes, so were you. Harold slowly bowed his head. Master. The word EC. Hoed through the chamber. Master. Not boss. Not leader. Master. Mercer smiled faintly. I never thought I'd see you again. The old man tapped his walking stick gently against the floor. I never thought you would give me a reason. Helena finally spoke. Why are you here? The old man answered simply. Because you've all forgotten the first rule. What rule? He smiled. Power is never the purpose. It's only the responsibility. He slowly walked toward the blue journals, picked up the first volume, turned a few pages, then closed it again. He looked at me. Edward left you knowledge. He did not leave you revenge. His words struck me harder than any threat. I lowered my eyes. For the first time, I realized how much of this journey had been driven by anger, by betrayal, by proving everyone wrong. The old man seemed to read my thoughts. He smiled gently. Justice and revenge begin on the same road. He paused. Only one of them knows when to stop. The chamber fell silent. Even Helena Roth listened. Then the old man reached into his coat. He removed a small leather notebook, worn with age. On the cover, only one word. Keeper. He handed it to me. This now belongs to you. I hesitated. What is it? He smiled. The final lesson Edward never had time to teach. Before I could open it, a loud crash echoed from somewhere above. The manor shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. One of Helena's companions rushed in. Chairwoman, the upper floors are collapsing. Helena turned sharply. Who attacked us? The messenger swallowed. It wasn't an army. It was one person. Silence. The old man quietly closed his eyes. I was afraid of that. Daniel frowned. Who? The messenger answered in a trembling voice. A woman. Calling herself the widow. The old man's calm expression disappeared. For the first time, there was genuine sorrow in his eyes. He whispered. Then we're already too late. The room fell silent. Because whatever the widow wanted, even the mysterious keepers, had failed to stop her. The words echoed through the collapsing chamber. A woman calling herself the widow. The old keeper closed his eyes. Not in fear. In grief. As if he had just heard the name of someone he had failed long ago. Daniel looked around. Who is she? The old man answered quietly. She was never supposed to survive. Silence. Helena Roth's face had turned pale. That's impossible. The keeper looked at her. So was everything else you believed impossible. Another explosion shook Blackwood Manor. Large stones crashed onto the floor. Mercer's guards rushed toward the exits. It's collapsing. The old keeper raised his walking stick. No. She isn't trying to kill us. Everyone looked at him. Then what's she doing? He smiled sadly. She's destroying history. Above ground. The group foe. GHT its way through the narrow tunnels. Dust filled the air. The ancient staircase cracked beneath our feet. As we reached the entrance hall, everyone stopped. The mansion was burning. Books. Paintings. Centuries-old documents. Everything Edward Carter, David Ryland, and the consortium had preserved was disappearing in flames. Standing calmly in the center of the hall was a woman dressed entirely in black. Long silver hair flowed behind her. She held an old brass lighter in one hand. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She simply watched the fire. She slowly turned toward us. Her eyes settled on the old keeper. A faint smile crossed her face. "Hello, teacher." The old man's shoulders dropped. "You shouldn't have come, Clara." The woman laughed softly. "So you still remember my real name?" Daniel frowned. "Clara?" The keeper nodded. "Before the world knew her as the widow. She was my brightest student." Harold Benson whispered. "I thought she died." "So did I," the keeper replied. Clara looked directly at Helena Roth. "You remember me?" Helena remained silent. Clara's smile disappeared. "You remember what you did?" The flames climbed higher. Smoke filled the hall. I stepped forward. "What do you want?" Clara looked at me, then at the blue journals in my hands. "I don't want them." Everyone froze. She pointed toward the burning library. "I don't want knowledge. I want freedom." Mercer frowned. "By burning everything?" Clara nodded. "For centuries, powerful people have fought over these secrets. The consortium, the keepers, the Carter legacy, the Rylands." She looked around the burning mansion. "And where did it lead?" She spread her arms. "To this." The old keeper sighed. "You still believe destroying knowledge will free humanity?" Clara shook her head. "No. I'm destroying the temptation." She reached into her coat, removed a small remote control. Red light blinking. Margaret Collins immediately recognized it. "Explosives." Clara smiled. "The entire estate." Daniel stepped forward. "There are innocent people outside." Clara looked genuinely saddened. "I know." "So leave." The keeper slowly walked toward her. "Clara, this isn't justice." She looked into his eyes. "No. It's mercy." For several seconds, teacher and student simply stared at one another. Then, Clara whispered something only he could hear. His face changed completely. He looked at her in disbelief. "You found it?" She nodded. "The archive." Harold's eyes widened. "No." Mercer stepped backward. "That's impossible." I looked at them all. "What archive?" No one answered. Not immediately. Finally, the keeper spoke. "There was never one collection of journals. There were two." The room fell silent. Hilo okayed directly at me. "Edward Carter only protected half of the truth." Clara smiled. "And I found the other half." She pressed her thumb lightly against the detonator. The red light changed to green. "I'll give you exactly 60 seconds. She looked straight at me. "Evelyn, if you want the complete truth about your grandfather, come alone." She slipped a folded map onto the floor, then disappeared into the smoke. No footsteps. No guards. No sound. Only fire. Margaret shouted. "She's gone." The timer on the detonator began counting down. 0:59. 0:58. 0:57. The keeper looked at me. His voice calm despite the chaos. "You have a choice. Save the journals. Or follow Clara." I looked down at the map in my hand. Then at my grandfather's journals. Then at Amelia. Waiting for my decision. Outside, the mansion groaned as another wall collapsed. And somewhere beyond the flames, the widow was leading me toward a secret that even the consortium had never found. The timer blinked relentlessly. 0:56. 0:55. The flames climbed higher. Smoke swallowed the grand staircase. The old keeper looked at me. "You don't have enough time to do both. Choose." I looked at the blue journals in my hands. Everything my grandfather had protected. Everything so many people had died for. Then I looked at Amelia. She understood before I spoke. She stepped forward. "I'll save the journals." I shook my head. "No." She smiled. "We're sisters. We don't leave each other anymore." For the first time in 26 years, we weren't separated. We were making the choice together. I turned to Daniel. "You help Amelia." He frowned. "And you?" I looked down at the folded map Clara had left behind. "I'm going after the truth." The keeper nodded slowly. "Edward would have made the same decision." Harold grabbed my arm. "Be careful. Clara never lies. But she never tells the whole truth either." 042. I ran through the burning corridors. The map led toward the oldest wing of Blackwood Manor, a place almost completely consumed by flames. The walls cracked. The ceiling groaned. Every step felt like the manor's last. Then, I found it. An ancient stone chapel hidden behind the estate, untouched by the fire. Waiting. The wooden door stood open. Inside, hundreds of candles burned. No electricity. No guards. Only silence. At the center, Clara stood beside a marble altar. She didn't turn around. I knew you'd come. I stepped inside. Where's the archive? She smiled. You've already walked across it. I frowned. What? She pointed to the stone floor beneath my feet. Every tile carried strange carvings. Ancient symbols. Family crests. Dates stretching back centuries. This chapel, she whispered, isn't a chapel. It's a vault. She knelt beside one stone tile, pressed her hand against it. A deep rumble echoed beneath us. The entire marble floor slowly divided into two halves. Cold air rose from below. A spiral staircase disappeared into darkness. Clara picked up a lantern. Come. I followed. The staircase seemed endless. Finally, we reached the bottom. I stopped breathing. It wasn't a vault. It was a library, far larger than Blackwood Manor's. Shelves stretched farther than the lantern light could reach. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, of handwritten journals, letters, maps, paintings. Every civilization, every century, every continent. I whispered, "This is impossible." Clara shook her head. "No, this is history." She walked slowly between the shelves. The consortium collected power. The keepers collected wisdom. She looked at me, but neither collected the truth. I frowned. What's the difference? She smiled sadly. Power edits history. Wisdom interprets history. The truth. She gently touched one of the old books. Remembers it. I noticed a familiar name. Edward Carter. Then another. David Rylant. Another. Adrian Mercer. Then, one that stopped me cold. Evelyn Carter. I stared at it. How? Clara nodded. Open it. My hands trembled as I lifted the leather cover. The first page was blank. The second, blank. The third contained only one sentence, written in fresh ink. History hasn't decided who you become. I looked up. What does this mean? Clara smiled. Every keeper writes their own final volume. I closed the journal. I'm not a keeper. She looked directly into my eyes. Aren't you? Before I could answer, footsteps echoed through the vast underground archive. Not one person. Several. Lanterns appeared in the distance. The old keeper emerged from the darkness. Behind him, Amelia, Daniel, Harold, even Helena Roth, all carrying the blue journals. They had escaped. The old keeper smiled when he saw me. You found it. I nodded. He looked around the endless shelves. No, he whispered. We found it. Clara slowly walked toward the center of the archive. She placed her lantern on an old wooden table, then looked at everyone. The war ends here. Helena Roth slowly shook her head. No. Clara's expression hardened. It has to. Then, the old keeper stepped between them. For the first time, his voice carried authority that silenced everyone. The Carter family, the consortium, the keepers. We have all spent generations protecting secrets. He looked at me. Perhaps Edward's greatest lesson wasn't to protect knowledge. He smiled, but to decide when it's finally time to share it. At that moment, I looked at the empty journal with my name on it. For the first time since the night I was told, Yo, you're not really family. I understood. This story had never been about revenge. It had been about choosing what kind of legacy I would leave behind. And now, the final chapter was mine to write. The underground archive was silent. Thousands of journals surrounded us. Centuries of history. Waiting. Watching. For the first time, no one was pointing a gun. No one was demanding power. No one was seeking revenge. Only one question remained. What happens now? The old keeper placed his walking stick against the wooden table. He looked at me. Evelyn. For 3 generations, people have killed to protect these secrets. He gently touched the blank journal bearing my name. You are the first person with the opportunity to end that cycle. I slowly opened the journal again. Its empty pages reflected the lantern light. I picked up the fountain pen lying beside it. Everyone watched. Harold, Daniel, Amelia, Lauren, Margaret, Helena, Clara, even Adrian Mercer. No one spoke. I wrote only one sentence. Knowledge belongs to humanity, not to families, empires, or secret societies. I closed the journal. The old keeper smiled. So, you've made your choice. I nodded. Yes. Helena Roth stepped forward. If these archives become public, there will be chaos. Markets will collapse. Governments may fall. She wasn't threatening me. She was warning me. I answered quietly. Then we don't release everything. Everyone looked at me. We preserve history. We expose crimes. We return stolen property. But we don't publish information that would endanger innocent people. Margaret Collins smiled. Justice, not revenge. Clara looked at me for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she smiled without sadness. Edward would be proud. Harold Benson slowly removed his glasses. I spent 30 years believing I was the smartest man in every room. He laughed softly. I spent the next 30 minutes discovering I wasn't. He looked at Daniel. I can never undo what I did. Daniel remained silent. Harold continued. But if you'll allow me, I'd like to spend whatever years I have left helping repair it. Daniel didn't forgive him. Not yet. But he gave a single nod. Sometimes, healing begins with honesty. Amelia walked toward me. She held out her silver bracelet. Hope. I looked at my own. Faith. Without speaking, we clasped hands. The 2 bracelets touched for the first time in 26 years. Eleanor burst into tears. My girls. She whispered. You finally came home. Months later, the headlines spread across the world. Ashford Group restructured under independent trustees. Stolen assets returned to their rightful owners. International fraud network dismantled. Hundreds of FOMO. Yes, recovered businesses that had been stolen decades earlier. Wrongful convictions were overturned. Hidden accounts were uncovered. Victims finally received justice. Not because secrets had been weaponized, but because the truth had finally been used responsibly. Richard Ashford accepted responsibility for his crimes and remained in prison. Victor Langford devoted his remaining years to rebuilding charities his family had once neglected. Sofia Varga vanished. Some believed she retired. Others believed she had started another life under another name. No one ever proved either. Harold Benson testified against the remaining members of the criminal network. He never asked for forgiveness. He simply told the truth. Every day, the consortium dissolved. Not because it was defeated, but because it no longer had anything left to hide behind. One spring morning, Amelia and I returned to our grandfather's old estate. The oak tree still stood, exactly as it had in the photograph. We buried the 2 worn bracelets beneath its roots. Faith, hope, they had done their job. Now, we no longer needed reminders of who we were. Before leaving, I found one final letter tucked inside the old bench beneath the tree. In my grandfather's handwriting. It had no puzzles, no riddles, no hidden maps. Only these words. My dear Evelyn, if you're reading this, then you finally understand something I spent my entire life trying to learn. The greatest inheritance isn't wealth. It isn't power. It isn't revenge. It's leaving the world kinder than you found it. I folded the letter carefully, looked toward Amelia, toward Daniel, toward the rising sun, then smiled. Because 12 years earlier, I had been told, you're not really family. But in the end, I discovered something far greater. Family isn't decided by who gives you a seat at the table. Family is decided by who stands beside you when the table burns. The end. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't making those who hurt you suffer. It's building a life so meaningful that their betrayal no longer defines your story.